Welcome to Sacred Realms. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. I'm your host, Lyndon Willoughby. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Matt Willoughby. Matt, we are gathered around a cheery fire this evening.
It is quite a cheery fire. It is nice and crackly and poppy and quite warm and cozy. It's very tone setting for the evening. Very nice.
I'm hoping that the crackle and pop is something that our mics are not picking up and that I'm not going to have to edit out of this episode later. But
I mean, you know it probably is.
This is an element of risk that I'm taking upon myself. And I ain't even mad about it, you know? It feels great.
It does. It's a wonderful addition to the evening. We've not done that before, so
this is a new thing for us.
If it works out well, maybe we'll continue.
And if it's a flaming disaster, literally,
then
we'll never do it again.
Yeah. I'll let you make that decision, yeah.
Oh, man. How you doing, Matt?
Oh, I'm good. I'm glad to be back. Glad to be back on a semi-regular schedule, 2 regular episodes in a row. Yeah, I think it's been a lot of fun. Here we are, the almost end of season 7. We've got one more episode, just the rank and recap. But we finished another game, Lyndon. That's 7 games down.
We finished a game this week. Yes, we did.
Are we more than halfway there now, technically?
Well, this is where I pull up the list. I know how many games are in the series, but we excluded some of them, like some of the multiplayer ones.
Right.
So I think that we are... no, our list consists of 17 games.
Okay. Well, never mind. So, not quite halfway.
Halfway.
All right. No celebration yet.
We're sure getting there, though.
Yeah, we're making headway. We're taking a chunk out of it.
Well, here this week to talk to us about the emotionally charged ending of The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker is returning favorite Max Nichols of Bungie and Hyrule Interviews. Huge fan of this section of the game. Max, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. Long time no see.
7 days, exactly.
I literally, I don't know if I told you this, Lyndon, but at one point I had sent you, right after I beat this game, I sent you a message practically begging you to let me do this episode. And then I deleted it, so I was like, no, that's selfish of me. And then I asked you more politely a few days later.
The energy of your plea went out into the universe and made its way to me after all. Because, we were trying to get everything scheduled out. And, Matt and I were talking about maybe doing this episode just us two. But that somehow didn't seem right. I felt like we needed a third party to discuss everything that happens here because, it's a big ol' thing. It's a major moment in the history of the Zelda series, and I think it deserves a panel of 3 to really accurately discuss.
Yeah, I think you're right. Although, is this our first ever finale episode with a guest? We normally do finales by ourselves.
There's no way. I would have to go back and look.
You had me for the finale of Breath of the Wild.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Because I wanted to talk about Hyrule Castle so much.
Well, that's fair.
And then we had to have had Josh for Adventure of Link.
Okay, fair enough. Point has been made. Yes.
Anyway, there's precedent. There's historical precedent. How many weeks ago have you beaten this game, Max?
It was probably 3 weeks ago now. Something like that. Maybe 4 at this point.
Oh wow, coming in hot, or coming in from a while ago. Like I just beat it today. Coming in very cold. Yeah, I just beat it today.
Did you just get to a point with this game where the momentum was building and you knew what was coming up and you're just like, screw it, I've got to forage on and I've got to clear it all out now?
Well, I was. Yes, to an extent, yes. But what actually happened was I was trying to prep for the last episode, and this was before you'd made the decision to take the break. So I finished the Triforce quest, and then I went on, so I didn't think I would be in this episode that I'm in now. and then I finished the game right after that. So, and then you delayed the episodes a few weeks, so that's why it was so far back.
Yeah, Lyndon, it's all our fault.
That 2-week gap really does make this season feel a lot longer than it actually has been. It's weird because I was looking back at the episode list. I always have to remind myself what chapter number this is when I start making the audio files and everything. I saw that this was only chapter 8, and it had me thinking, especially now at the end, especially the way that we've organized this game. It's actually somewhat more of a svelte game than people usually mention when they talk about it.
Yeah, it's on the slimmer side compared to most of the other 3D Zeldas.
Yeah, I mean, when you just look at main content, like specifically dungeons and main quest lines and things, it's pretty short. Like there are, based on this week's recap dungeon, there are 4 bosses.
Yeah.
And that's it.
But it's so funny because the way that we do this can kind of make things seem artificially longer or shorter than they actually are. For instance, this game only has 8 chapters, right? But back when we did A Link to the Past, I mean, we were doing it according to dungeons, right? And so that game felt absolutely massive just because we spent 13 weeks on it, you know?
Looking back on some of those earlier seasons where, we have a lot more episodes, but each one is, an hour or so, I think we're probably averaging about the same total amount of pod per game when you look at total hours spent just talking, because we do talk a lot. Like some of these games that we have compressed into, or that feel more compressed just based on number of episodes, instead of doing 13 or 15, we're doing 8. I think those are the ones we're getting 2.5 hour episodes out of. So I think that it just spreads everything out a little bit more, but when you condense it, we're still putting the same amount of pod out there, right? Because we have just way too many things to say, way too frequently.
There's no doubt about that. We can get kind of long-winded when it comes to some of this stuff, but I guess before we get into talking about before we get into the Sacred Realms rundown, do that whole thing, Max, because so next week we're doing our recap episode, and the detective's going to come back on with us to help us actually rank this on the list. So Matt and I are not going to talk about our final impressions of the game or rankings or anything, but I am just curious before we get into the meat of the episode. In replaying this game, did it move around at all on your list?
Ooh, good question. So when I first started replaying, for the first several hours, I was like, oh, this is even better than I remember. This is I'm enjoying this more than I enjoy Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask. At this point, this is probably my number 3 Zelda game. Towards the latter half of the game, those feelings kind of mellowed a little bit. So I'd probably put it on equal footing in my esteem with Ocarina of Time and or Majora's Mask. I kind of have a hard time ranking those 3 against each other. But it's definitely top 5.
Yeah, those were the 3 that I always felt like, I have no idea where my own personal ranking is going to land with those. I didn't necessarily have that worry for Matt, but but yeah, I was kind of expecting that to be the case for me as well. And I'm not going to say if that is the case. That'll be next week's content, but definitely glad to hear that you enjoyed it just about as much as you remember. There's nothing quite as disappointing as revisiting a game that you have just impeccable memories of, and then coming away from that most recent playthrough actually feeling a little down on it. That's always kind of a bummer.
Yeah, that's no fun. It so rarely happens to me with Zelda games, though. They almost always hold up, or they do the thing where they age like a fine wine, and I appreciate them even more on replays, which happens sometimes.
Yeah, and that's why Zelda 2 has climbed to the top of your ranking. That's a little joke.
Oh, no.
That one aged like vermouth.
Vermouth that you forgot to put
in the fridge, and now it's just soured wine. Ugh. Yeah, that's not great.
I feel like that's maybe just a little unfair. It's a little Zelda harsh. Too, but
it was better than I thought I was going. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would have. So kudos to Zelda 2.
Well, there you go.
Awesome. All right. Well, with a little bit of a preamble now out of the way, I say we go ahead and jump into this thing, get talking about everything that happened this week in The Wind Waker. Before we do that, let's get into some housekeeping. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week, we play a new section of a Zelda game. Then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod to get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, vote on what game we play next, and so much more. Additionally, one of the benefits that we offer to Master Sword patrons and above is that they get their names read every week here on the show. Those legendary individuals are Theodore, Matt, Chris, Daniel, Fallout 907, Kelso, Tiffany the Star, Daxel, Patrice, Stephanie, Darknuck, Brian, George, Mike, Dylan, Allie, Lennon, Melanie, Kolku, Aiden, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Dante, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru the Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Tyler, Ben, Daniel, Nick D_TV, Travis, Christian, Jonathan, Hyrule Interviews, aka your guest of the evening, Max Nichols, Garrett, and Drew. These are all legendary individuals. We appreciate them so very much. I would not wish that any of these people be lost eternally at the bottom of the sea in a flooded kingdom.
I mean, I don't wish that upon very many people, so that's a very low bar. How about we wish them to rise out of the depths of the eternal sea and find hope amongst the seeds that King Bosphoramos has given to the world. The seeds of hope.
That would be King Daphnis.
Daphnis, that's right.
Yeah.
Well,
you got your King's Hyrule mixed up there for a second.
I did.
Okay. It's
easy to do.
It happens to the best of us, really. Okay. All right, but without further ado, let's talk about what we played. We do that, of course, every week in the Sacred Realms Rundown, which is a 6-part analysis of what we played this week and the feelings that it made us feel. Today, we are covering The Wind Waker Chapter 8, which is the finale section of this game. Part 1 of the Sacred Realms Rundown is as always, the plot recap, this week as read by Matt. Take it away, Matt.
With the full Triforce assembled and the King of Red Lion's admonishment still strong in our ears, we make our way to the portal that leads to the underwater kingdom of Hyrule that resides at the Tower of the Gods. Once we reach the place, the shining light is gone, but the king tells us to show the completed piece of the Triforce to the gods to prove our worthiness. After lifting the completed golden triangle, the portal appears. Not only does the portal appear, but the triangle disappears from our grasped hand, and to our surprise, the back of our left hand now bears the sigil of the Triforce, with the lower left portion shining brightly. The king tells us that the power of the Triforce now dwells within us, and that the indwelling of the Triforce of Courage is proof that we are indeed the true hero spoken of in legend. You have controlled the wind and crossed the seas, and here, near the end of your quest, the power of the gods has been bestowed upon you. Surely from this moment on, you will be known as the Hero of Winds. Now go forth, to Hyrule, to Zelda's side. And so, into the portal we go. But as soon as we enter the castle, we immediately can tell that ruin and destruction has visited this place in our absence. The statue of the hero lays in ruins, and the staircase to the basement lays open to the ceiling. We quickly descend to the Chamber of the Sword, where to our great relief, we see Zelda still standing there. As we approach, however, she turns and is seemingly swallowed up by a great white light. In her place is an empty room, and the voice of Ganondorf calls out, mocking us. He tells us that with his power fully restored, there is no safe haven either above the sea or below it where we can hide, and we were foolish to leave Zelda in this place. He has taken her, and it is here that he promises we shall spend an eternal slumber. With these words, a ring of fire springs up around the sword platform, and 2 royal Darknuts appear to do battle. With the power of the Master Sword, the Triforce of Courage, and our immense skill with the blade, we make short work of even these mightiest of foes. With the Dark Knights vanquished, we head back up to the main hall and see that the electric fence guarding the exterior of the castle has been deactivated. We head through, but are again blocked by the magical barrier that contains the castle from the rest of the Sunken Kingdom. We unsheath the Master Sword and bring its full power to bear upon the magical barrier. And the barrier shatters to 1,000 pieces under the might of the blade, and we are allowed to cross the bridge into the wider kingdom of Hyrule. The path before us is strewn with enemies we have defeated dozens of times on our journey, and this is no different. We make quick work of the foes and follow the path to an ominous chasm. Using our hookshot, we cross this chasm and find ourselves in a dark and foreboding tower, which can only be the lair of the evil king. As we explore Ganon's tower, we find 4 corridors that resemble the 4 dungeons that we have tackled along the way. At the end of each of these corridors, we are transported to a grayscale magical realm where we are forced to fight the boss of each dungeon once again. Using only the items we had available at the time, but still with the power of the fully restored Master Sword, we make quick work of these phantoms. With each boss that is felled, the door at the end of the lava-strewn cave glows brighter, and after defeating all 4, the door is opened to the bowels of the tower. We progress through the tower and find a room with lanterns and symbols on the wall arranged in different patterns. The king tells us that through our magical stone to memorize the details of this room, as it will help in the coming trials. We head across the central chamber and find a room with switches that we can activate with the boomerang. We do so in the sequence suggested by the lit torches, and before us a dark purple portal appears, a twisted mockery of the golden light that has shepherded us to this underwater kingdom. Out of the darkness, the King of Red Lions appears and tells us that this portal must be how Ganondorf escaped his imprisonment and invaded the Great Sea. We can use it to return to the surface if we require any potions or need to square away any unfinished business. But we need to continue on our way, so we head back to the room with the torches and gaze into the abyss below. A stone tablet on the far side of the room gives us a vague hint about following the way of the sword from the shadowy warrior, which means nothing to us at the moment. With no way forward but down, we jump into the mist and further into the depths of this evil place. Below, we are immediately confronted once again by Phantom Ganon. The spectral foe is quick to fall to the power of the fully realized Master Sword, and as it falls, its sword also falls to the ground. We notice, with the tablet's hint in mind, that the sword falls with the hilt pointing directly at one of the many doors that ring the room. We head through the door and are rewarded with a resounding chime, and also with another incarnation of the evil specter to fight. As we continue this pattern, we defeat the ghost what we feel like a dozen times, but eventually the phantom not only drops his sword, but a chest containing the powerful sacred light arrows. In the next room, we use the light arrows to immediately destroy the spectral Ganon, and this time we use his sword to destroy the wall with the sigil of a tusked boar on it. This finally reveals the path forward, and we head to confront the real Ganondorf once and for all. At the top of the stairs, after fighting off some more moblins and darknuts, we enter the ornate door and find a room of concentric circles. The outer circle is stone with torches dimly lighting the area. The middle circle is made of pure water that reflects the ceiling above, and the innermost circle is stone with a giant bed curtained in gauzy silk. On the bed lays an apparently sleeping Zelda, and behind her, looming large over her, is the dark shape of the evil king himself. As we approach the bed as quietly as possible given the water on the floor, Ganondorf hushes us so as not to wake the sleeping princess. He tells us not to be hasty, and he reaches for her forehead. And as he does, we see the same imprint of the Triforce on the back of his hand, with the topmost triangle glowing brightly. "I can see this girl's dreams," he says. And as we watch, he begins describing what he sees to us. Oceans, 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 oceans. Oceans as far as the eye can see. They are vast seas, none can swim across them. They yield no fish to catch. What did the King of Hyrule say? That the gods sealed Hyrule away? He now rises quickly, eyes glowing malevolently as he stares at us from behind Zelda's bed. His tone is rising, and the rage in his voice is unmistakable. And they left behind people who would one day awaken Hyrule? How ridiculous. So many pathetic creatures scattered across a handful of islands, drifting on this sea like fallen leaves on a forgotten pool. What can they possibly hope to achieve? Don't you see? All of you, your gods destroyed you. While he has been monologuing, his gaze has been far off, as if on the object of his anger. But now he focuses his malevolent eyes squarely on us. I have been waiting for you, boy. For one like you, yes, for the hero. Do not betray my expectations. With this last line spoken with the derision and a sneer, we see the form of the evil king begin to morph grotesquely and become almost large enough to fill the room. The bed Zelda lays upon disappears, and before our eyes, the evil king has seemingly transformed into a gigantic beast. And as the black beast falls heavily to the floor, we see it is suspended from strings like a puppet. This realization is quickly followed by the puppet beast moving to attack, and we must join battle with it. Using the experience from our quest, we grab the boomerang and begin cutting the strings of this dark facade. As we do, the puppet hangs limply, and we see its tail contains a large blue sphere. Sensing a weak spot, we use our new light arrows to pierce the sphere, and as we do, the entire puppet writhes with pure light and obvious pain. So we settle into the rhythm of the fight. Dodge the blows, cut the strings, shoot the tail. On and on it goes until the puppet ascends to the ceiling. But instead of defeat, it changes shape to embody a giant spider that attempts to crush us beneath its girth. As we maneuver around the room, we find that we must position ourselves behind the spider to shoot the blue sphere before it reascends to the ceiling. After some trial and error, we once again force the puppet to retreat. This time it comes down as a hairy snake-like creature that slithers along the floor of the arena in a hectic pattern at incredible speeds. It takes all of our skill to hit this moving target, but after 3 hits, the puppet finally ascends and explodes in a shower of fire and sparks. Ganondorf looks down from the chandelier at the top of the towering room. As we stand in the water, utterly exhausted from our fight with his various marionettes, he says, "Yes, surely you are the hero of time reborn. Your time has come. Come now and stand before me." He ascends by magic through the roof, the unconscious Zelda still in hand. Luckily, the string from the puppet still reaches the floor, so we climb up to the top where Ganondorf was standing and begin the manual climb to the roof of the tower. Our handy grapple hook allows us to ascend the many levels of the wooden edifice and reach the outer door. Once we exit onto the roof, we see Ganondorf standing there atop this tall tower. And below us we can see the entirety of the abandoned kingdom of Hyrule laid out at our feet. The ruin of the land around hides what must have been a truly grand kingdom in ancient times. And as our exhaustion from the fight and the long climb continues to mount, Ganondorf continues his monologue. My country lay in a vast desert. When the sun rose in the sky, a burning wind punished my lands, searing the world. And when the moon climbed into the dark of night, a frigid gale pierced our homes. No matter when it came, the wind carried the same thing: death. But the wind that blew across the green fields of Hyrule brought something other than suffering and ruin. I coveted that wind, I suppose. It can only be called fate that here I would again gather the 3 with the crests, that I should lay my hands on that which grants the wishes of the beholder, that when power, wisdom, and courage come together, the gods would have no choice but to come down. The power of the gods, the Triforce. He who touches it will have whatever he desires granted. Already the crest of wisdom is mine, and now all that remains. And with that said, Ganondorf turns slowly to face us, and with a movement as swift as the wind he speaks of, attacks and incapacitates us with ease. In our exhaustion, our raised shield does nothing to stop his powerful blows, and the Master Sword is cast from our hands, and Ganondorf grasps us by the left hand and lifts us into the air. Do not fear, I will not kill you. I merely need the power of the god that dwells within you. Now let us put an end to that which binds us together. And as we lay hanging limply in his grasp, the hands of Zelda, Ganondorf, and our own hand begin to glow in unison. From each of us, a golden triangle appears, and the three pieces coalesce into the completed Triforce. It hovers in midair, awaiting a hand to touch it and a wish to be placed upon it. And as we lay on the ground, helpless and defeated, we hear Ganondorf begin to call out his wish to the gods. Expose this land to the rays of the sun once more. Let them burn forth. Give Hyrule to me. But another voice rings out from the place that the Triforce rests. A voice that is familiar to us, but that shouldn't be here. He who touches it will have whatever he desires granted? That is what you said, is it not, Ganondorf? King Daphne Snohansen Hyrule stands defiantly before the towering figure of the King of Evil. In human form once more, the ancient king stands before his foe with his hand firmly placed upon the sacred Triforce, his red robes and full white beard flowing in the wind on the top of the tower. This regal man stands to usurp Ganondorf's wish. Gods of the Triforce, hear that which I desire. Hope! I desire hope for these children. Give them a future. Wash away this ancient land of Hyrule and let a ray of hope shine on the future of this world. And let our destinies finally be fulfilled. Ganondorf, may you drown with Hyrule. With the ancient king's wish spoken, the Triforce pulses with sacred light and breaks apart, scattering to the ends of the earth. As it does, the sunken kingdom begins to shake, and the water that is suspended above it begins to fall in a torrent of unceasing rain. Ganondorf begins to laugh, an evil laugh that betrays his madness. The rain and wind and lightning pound at our face as life begins to flood our body once again. The weariness and exhaustion seems to flee with each drop of the salty water, and we rise from the ground. Next to us, we see Zelda doing the same, stirring for the first time since we saw her on her bed. Ganondorf scoffs at the king's wish, but from behind us we hear Zelda cry out as she rises with the Master Sword in hand. What are you laughing at, Ganondorf? You're insane. Link, I'm sorry I overslept, but I think it's time for us to say goodbye to this place. We must return to the world above, back to our ocean. She winks slyly at us, a gesture more suited to Tetra than to Zelda, and hands us the Master Sword. Ganondorf, however, seems keen on preventing us from doing any such thing, and promises to show us his vision of what our future holds. He summons his twin swords and turns to do battle, a vicious and insane smile on his face and bloodlust in his eyes. And as battle with the evil king is joined, Zelda grabs the bow and light arrows from us and moves to the edge of the arena to cover us from afar. Ganondorf flies at us from across the arena, and even with his immense size, proves to be a swift and accurate swordsman. His blows are powerful, fast, and his defense is comprehensive. He uses many of our own moves against us, like dodges and parries, and blocks our own attempts at the same. After a furious exchange of blows, Zelda lands a hit with the light arrows and stuns the evil king, allowing us to land some crucial hits with the Master Sword. Ganondorf jumps across the arena to Zelda and swats her aside, but before he can finish her off, we join the battle again. Zelda gets to her feet and says, "Link, you know what to do," before beginning to shoot light arrows once more. Not really knowing what it is that she wants us to do, we continue to strike at Ganondorf, but not a single blow lands. He even dodges all the light arrows that Zelda is volleying at him. Finally, we get the idea that Zelda wants to use the mirror shield to reflect a light arrow at Ganondorf that he can't dodge. So we position ourselves carefully and do just that. After landing a flurry of blows from the Master Sword, Ganondorf launches us high into the air. We come down and use the momentum to our advantage, driving the sacred blade deep into the very head of the evil king. Ganondorf stands in repose, arms by his side, jaw quivering, with the blade of evil's bane protruding from his brow, hilt towards the sky. As we watch, he speaks his last words. "The wind, it is blowing," before he turns to stone. Ganondorf, the king of evil from the ancient world, is defeated. And as we collapse into Zelda's arms from exhaustion, King Daphnis approaches us. My children, I have lived regretting the past, and I have faced those regrets. If only I could do things over again. Not a day of my life has gone by without my thoughts turning to my kingdom of old. I have lived bound to Hyrule, and in that sense, I was the same as Ganondorf. But you, I want you to live for the future. There may be nothing left for you here, but despite that, you must look forward and walk a path of hope, trusting that it will sustain you when darkness comes. Farewell. This is the only world your ancestors were able to leave you. Please, forgive us. Zelda begs the king to come with us, to continue to live above the waves and guide us as we search for another land, a land that will be the next Hyrule. King Daphnis looks at her and smiles. Ah, but child, that land will not be Hyrule. It will be your land. And with those words, the sea finally comes crashing down upon the top of the tower. But instead of the crushing weight and suffocating water, we find ourselves encased in a magical protection. As we begin floating towards the surface of the water, we see Zelda in a similar situation, and she floats on above us. But as we look back to the top of the tower, we see the stone statue of Ganondorf and the solitary figure of King Daphnis no Hence in Hyrule. We reach out for our friend and guide, trying to drag him with us to the surface and away from certain death. He briefly reaches toward us, but in the end he turns his eyes down upon his kingdom and surrenders to the fate of his wish. He chooses to be washed away with the past and remain there with it. Sunlight and warmth bring us out of unconsciousness. The waves undulating and the seagulls' cries bring us around, and we see Tetra beside us, no longer clothed like a princess of old, but once again the pirate captain who started us on this journey. The familiar figure of Prince Komali flies down before us, grinning from ear to ear, and behind him the pirate ship is sailing towards us, with Errol, the crew, Medley, and Makar en route to save us from the sea. Tetra winks at us in victory, but it is the familiar voice of Errol that truly brings us to be rooted in this moment of victory. While the quest to defeat Ganondorf and save the Great Sea from his evil is over, our new quest is just beginning. We have taken the King's charge to heart, and after carving ourselves a new ship in the shape of the King of Red Lions, we head off across the Great Sea with Tetra and her pirates to find this new land. We leave behind our home of Outset Island once more, but this time we head off to find the hope that King Daphnis spoke of, and to bring that hope to all the people of the Great Sea. The hope of a prosperous future.
Well done, as always, Matt. Let's get into part 2, which is our takes, where we talk about this section of the game and how it made us feel. Okay.
Meanwhile, Gatsby just ran sprinting right past us and got up on his producer's couch. So
Gatsby, the producer.
Don't know what's going on with that, but
well, he's overseeing the production. That's his job.
We pay him well for it.
In kibbles. All right. So there's a lot to talk about here. And I'm kind of struggling to decide where is maybe the best place to start. I feel like we should really talk about the plot and the narrative and everything that kind of goes into that, and then talk about the actual structure of the gameplay secondary. So with all that being said, Max, I know you said that this section of game has got a lot of emotional resonance for you. And I want to open up the floor to you to kind of tell us all about that, like your feelings about the ending of this game.
Yeah. How much do you want me to get into the actual finale right now?
I mean, feel like open season here.
Okay,
just
whatever I want to talk
right
about.
into it. Yep.
So, The Wind Waker probably has my favorite storytelling of any Zelda game. Hard to compare to like Majora's Mask and Link's Awakening because they're a whole other ball game over there. But of the main series games, it's my favorite. And most of that comes down to the character of Ganondorf and the character of Daphnis, Nohantz, and Hyrule, who are foils of each other, right? Like they're these two old men, basically, that we meet over the course of the story of this game. They're both people from ancient Hyrule, and they both love Hyrule. Yeah, and they both and to me, The Wind Waker is a story of how these two characters dealt with loss in opposite ways. They're each a foil to each other, right? Ganondorf coveted Hyrule. He coveted that wind, right? And to him, it was about possession, and he couldn't let go when Hyrule was lost. He was obsessed with getting it back. And Daphnis also loved Hyrule. And it's a little bit, there's kind of maybe this hints that like earlier on, he probably did want to restore Hyrule. He certainly like wanted to work with the Deku Tree and stuff to raise the land out of the sea again. But in the end, he makes the opposite choice, which is that he lets go of the Hyrule that he loves because he cares more about these children that he's shepherded, and one of them's his descendant, theoretically. And to me, that's like just this very evocative storytelling that happens at the end here, where they really put these two characters juxtaposed against each other. And Ganondorf in particular, like this is kind of the one and only Zelda humanized to too much of an extent at all. Like you really sympathize with Ganondorf's goals here, right? Like I remember the first time I played this, and honestly every time I've played it since, I'm going through the ending here and I'm like, I do want him to bring Hyrule back. His wish isn't so bad, right? Like expose the land to the rays of the sun once more. Like I want that as a fan of Hyrule.
Yeah, I was about to say that's exactly what you and I were talking about in the episode where we first go to underwater Hyrule.
Yep. Yeah, and that's why I asked you that question.
I see what you did there.
It was a setup all along.
So just it's kind of, there's some nuance in all that, right? But like I love this interplay of these surprisingly complex characters dealing with this surprisingly complex for a Zelda game emotion of like giving up on the memories of the past in favor of the future, or not in Ganondorf's case. And it's almost like Link and Tetra, I prefer, are like side characters in this final narrative, which is a little weird, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can definitely see that. I think to me, one of the things that made this whole section of the game feel so emotionally affecting was that juxtaposition between two major characters who are not characters that we typically see a lot of depth and like a lot of characterization from, right? I mean, the Zelda series isn't one that technically usually gives a lot of its main characters much pathos, but when we do get it and when it's done well, I feel like it's very effective. And one of those characters, like you were mentioning, Max, that I think has been long overdue for some of that is Ganondorf. And I think, especially in hindsight, knowing what we know now about Ganondorf from a lore standpoint, about how he is the reincarnation of Demise's curse, and he's basically fated to continue reappearing in Hyrule, forever.
Which we know you love.
Yeah. In order to like plague the hero, basically. So like we know that larger lore about Ganondorf, and I think one of the reasons that maybe, if I'm remembering correctly, one of the reasons that you always sort of disliked that plot element, Max, is because it can remove some of Ganondorf's agency as a character. But I think what happens here in this section of the game shows that even within that, and granted, this was not like a concept that was thought of at the time that this game was made. So maybe there's a little bit more credit that I'm giving to it than it really deserves. But I think that there's a lot of room for Ganondorf as a character to have agency and to have his own motivations and everything, even within that overall structure of who he is as a character, you know?
Yeah. So first of all, you are correct. That is why I dislike the demise. What to me feels like a retcon, the demise retcon for the series. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I'm kind of able to ignore that in the context of the Wind Waker. Like, I know in the back of my head that there's that greater context, but to me, it's not really part of the Wind Waker story. I know a lot of people derive additional enjoyment from that greater context. Thinking about how what they're seeing in front of them in the game they're currently playing connects to other games. That is a source of enjoyment for a lot of people. But it often is not for me. But that's okay. I can turn it off in my head.
Yeah. And to talk more about kind of, I think not necessarily the point that's being made here, but the very intentional choice that was made on the part of the story team and the story that this game was finally telling, which is one of being willing to let the past go and to
let it die.
Yeah, and to forge a new path forward, like as Matt just alluded to quote a
horrible
line,
Star Wars movie.
To quote a line from a masterpiece of a Star Wars film, let the past go, kill it if you have to. And I think, and I don't, have we talked about The Last Jedi on this podcast before? I love The Last Jedi. Matt doesn't like it.
Oh, wait, that was from The Last Jedi? I thought that was from Skywalker.
Yeah, that's from The Last Jedi.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's
let the past die, kill it if you have to. And I actually kind of like what this is doing for similar reasons, just because, especially in this modern age of almost immediate wish fulfillment on the indefinite extension of fictional properties, right? It's sometimes refreshing for a story to be told in which it's comfortable moving into something new and cutting free of, I guess, that warm comfort blanket of the story that you knew previously. I don't think that's something that every fictional story needs to do in order to be satisfying, but I think that it can be very satisfying, and I think that it is here. I think that when this game ends, it's moving into what I think is a very intriguing place of, Link and Tetra, striking out to try and find a new land to settle. And especially knowing that we have some games coming up that are direct sequels to this, it makes me even more excited to go explore those. What's interesting to me, though, is that aside from those games, as bold of a story choice as this is, it still is fairly inconsequential in the greater canon of Zelda games, simply because the adult timeline is not one that is
like this game and then the sequels to this game, and that's it.
Yeah. Like, this isn't something that's been, and I'm not even necessarily saying that it's something that needs to be revisited. I'm not over here saying, like, I need a new mainline 3D game set in the adult timeline in whatever new land they find or whatever. But I just think that the structure of the Zelda series is so interesting because it allows this to have a lot of impact, but to also simultaneously mean almost nothing,
Yeah. I think for me, one of the huge impacts was giving Ganondorf that context of, I wanted Hyrule because I was tired of seeing my people live in this arid wasteland. I know he didn't say he wanted it for his people. It sounded like he wanted it for himself. But if you come at it from the standpoint of a monarch, which is what he was the king of the Gerudo, like wanting that and coveting just a place that isn't trying to kill you 24/7. Giving Ganondorf a motive outside of just the desire for conquest was an interesting choice.
Yeah.
Especially knowing that this is the Ganondorf from the Ocarina of Time. The little bit where he says, "You are truly the hero of time reincarnated," that was incredibly cool. for me, the main character of this entire final finale was Ganondorf, and like King Daphnes as well. Like you said, Max, it's really Link and Zelda or Link and Tetra are just there to facilitate Ganondorf's death, and that's it. They're not. Link doesn't wish on the Triforce.
Yeah,
Daphnes does, and like. Link fights Ganondorf because Ganondorf attacks him, not because Link's trying to protect anything at this point. Like, Ganondorf can't do anything anymore. The Triforce has been wished upon. There's nothing to be done anymore. Now it's going to go separate into its 3 pieces and go back to the Sacred Realm.
Yeah,
like,
it's interesting. I think this might be the only final boss where the only stakes left are the lives of the characters there.
Yeah.
The land's already decided. Like,
yeah,
the greater fate of Hyrule is already decided at that point.
Yeah, there's nothing left except Ganondorf just being, and Tetra says that he's insane, and maybe he is now that his entire plan has been foiled right before his eyes. It was within his reach, but Daphne's beat him to it by, 1.5 feet. Like, man, he probably did lose his mind a little bit.
Imagine the frustration.
Yeah, seriously, I would have been furious. And
it's so crazy because I think in a show or movie that has a little bit more maturity, I guess, just in terms of like, I don't know, or at least more realism in terms of its storytelling, right? We would be having a greater discussion right now about, to what extent is it appropriate to try and empathize with like homicidal, genocidal, evil characters, because this is Zelda and it's all kind of sort of cartoonish, Like I think it's a little bit less uncomfortable to sort of pick this apart a little bit and to maybe empathize with Ganondorf. But it still leaves me kind of thinking like, yes, I think this is a cool trick where it sort of makes you feel a little sorry for him. His little monologue is definitely relatable, I think, in a very big way. I think it's some great writing for that character. But at the same time, you sort of have to wonder, like, even within that, like, his motives are not pure, right? Like,
and you know that because what he has done in the past, knowing that this comes from the adult timeline Ganondorf, when he is in control of everything, he just fills it with monsters. So it's still just a place that's going to kill you. So like he spoils the land anyway. And whether that is what is the incarnation of Demise's curse, I think is probably more apt than, like, you have to, in some ways, what I do with my headcanon is like Ganondorf is who he is, and then like once that power to affect that change is like within his grasp, that's when like the nature of the curse comes out, and he just can't help himself from being a power hungry egomaniac.
Yeah,
and like that's why when he touches the Triforce, it corrupts the land. Like it's not. I don't know. Like there's some nuance there. Also, he could just totally be insane from his theoretically thousands of years in captivity. And I mean, actions speak louder than words, whether or not you covet the wind because it's green and cooling instead of arid. Like, why do you fill it with monsters and just try to kill everybody then?
Yeah. It's interesting, too, because it has me considering the timeline of this character a little bit. We know that after the events of Ocarina of Time, he was sealed in the Sacred Realm for quite a while. And then I believe the lore of the Wind Waker says that he broke out and, obviously reinvaded Hyrule, and that's what caused the people of Hyrule to appeal to the gods, who then flooded it. So I guess the way that this worked is that he was basically just sealed under the sea for hundreds of years.
No, this was
right?
before the sea was. Oh,
no, after Hyrule is flooded. He's not sealed in the Sacred Realm again or anything.
No, he's under the sea.
Yeah, he's sealed under the sea. So were he and Daphnes just like down there together for hundreds of years, or?
I'm unclear on what happened to Daphnes and how he became the boat, and also how he became a human again. Like, when does that happen?
Yeah, my impression has always been that he wandered as a boat for like 1,000 years, but I don't know if that's
what I thought too. Yeah,
all the fishmen know him,
and so do all of the gods, the Deku Tree and the Great Fish and everybody else, Valu. They all know him.
To me, the interesting thing where my mind kind of goes with this is that, like, yes, the King of Red Lions basically was roaming the Great Sea as a demigod, and for those hundreds or thousands of years or whatever. And I think that that's really cool, knowing that he was kind of in fellowship with all these other remnants of the old kingdom for that entire time, just waiting for a hero to appear. I think that gives a lot of extra meaning and depth to his character and adds a lot to his motivations and our sympathy for him. And then, if Ganondorf is also sealed below the sea for that entire time, we know at some point he was able to create that portal and to ascend back to the surface. So I guess it stands to reason that he was basically just down there by himself going insane that whole time.
Yeah, and also, now that we know that you can get past the barrier that protected Hyrule Castle, I would only assume that he was living in his tower that whole time, or in the remnants of the ruined land of Hyrule, more or less by himself. And that's where he constructed that tower and eventually created the portal, because he couldn't get into Hyrule Castle. Otherwise, he would have freed all of his minions that were in there and tried to get beneath the statue of the hero a lot earlier than he did.
He had a few thousand years to refine his puppet making skills.
Yeah, oh man.
Yeah, it's a little bit unclear exactly how much of underwater Hyrule was frozen by the seal, right? Was it just the bubble around Hyrule Castle, or was it all of underwater Hyrule? It's kind of not sure about that. Sorry, I have a tangent here. It's not related to the story, but a quote I recently found. Did you know Gaming actually found this from like an old Nintendo Dream interview that hasn't been translated by anyone but them. But they have a quote from Aonuma where he says that if they had had more time, their original plan was to pull a Link to the Past and have you go in underwater Hyrule and explore around down there. Which maybe puts some of my claims about how the technology of the open world works to the test here, but it makes me sad that Wind Waker's only a 2.5 year development cycle, by far the shortest, other than Majora's Mask, of any of the 3D Zeldas.
Well, it really does make you wonder. I mean, obviously, Nintendo has a very, very different ethos now about how long it should take for them to release mainline entries in this series, right? Like we say, being now 5 years out from Breath of the Wild's release, before we get to Tears of the Kingdom. So yeah, I definitely agree with you, Max. I'm very intrigued by the idea of this game being made by a Nintendo of today, who's totally comfortable taking 5-6 years to make a game. And I love this game and I love the final product that it is, but it's hard not to be just a little disappointed that we didn't get to see that version of it, especially given that whole dual world dynamic is pretty, it's a very big part of this series on an ongoing basis. And I know that it typically is a little bit more associated with the top-down games than the 3D games, but I would really have loved to have seen a version of that done here and think it could be really cool. Obviously, that was never to be. I mean, we were, we didn't even get all the above the sea dungeons that they were originally planning for this game, so it was never going to happen. But yeah. One last thing I want to say about Ganondorf as a character real quick here is that I just think this is a really big moment, because essentially we're seeing the end of the version of Ganon that we are the most familiar with in the whole series. I think. Like, tell me if that's kind of an unfair thing to say, or if you think we get to know another version better. But I think to most people, this is kind of the Ganondorf / Ganon. Like, this is sort of the main one in the way that the Hero of Time has kind of become the most prominent version of Link. And from that perspective, I think it's very interesting to see his arc end, right? Like, a lot of these big characters in these games, especially Zelda's and Link's, they go through their game and then we end the game and then we get some sense of what they're off to do next, but we don't really get much of a complete arc for any of the main three characters ever. Mm-hmm. And we absolutely get one here. And I think that's...
He did.
Yeah, he's dead. He's very dead. And I think that's really nice.
We see his beginning as a human and his death here across 2 games, which is the only time we see like a characterized, has a personality, is human, has human motivations Ganon across 2 games like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally agree.
And I guess you can also this is a little complicated because technically the Ganondorf of Twilight Princess is also this one, but
but he's pretty demonic at that point.
Yeah.
He goes full evil boar mode in that one also.
Very, very little in the way of redeeming qualities for that incarnation.
He also does
Ganondorf.
his whole disembodied head Andros thing.
I hate that.
yeah.
That's awful. Looking forward to it. Yay!
Yeah. But regardless, I think now that we've kind of talked about Ganondorf, we've talked about King Daphnis. I don't know. Let's just spend.
Well, hold on. I want to also say, I love Zelda feeling like Tetra again. That ending where she's back to winking and she's back to being mischievous and she's shooting Ganondorf with light arrows. Like getting Tetra back in Zelda form was very satisfying. I really, really, really liked that.
Well, and I'm glad to hear you say that. I felt the same way. It is interesting because now when you look back on her overall trajectory throughout the game, that moment when she becomes Zelda that you felt like she was kind of being portrayed as out of character for her.
Yeah.
That's kind of a blip on the whole thing, right?
I would agree.
That was a very short moment. That never really recurred again. But I think mostly because we just didn't actually see her again. But
the problem
until
with that
now,
moment, I know this is like out tangent at this point, but the problem I've always had with that moment is that after that moment, she never has agency in the story again. She never like makes a choice that affects anything. Whereas before that, she's making choices left and right, doing like leading her pirates, actively doing things, taking action. Like the Tetra we knew would never have agreed to just stay behind in Hyrule where Daphne's and Link went off. Like,
yeah, you're absolutely right.
So out of character for her to me.
Yeah.
Even if she's
I totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah. So anyway, Lyndon, you were trying to transition us to talking about the overall section of the game. So I'm going to let you do that now.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that very much. And I mean, the thing is, I don't know how much there is to say about the overall section of this game without talking about the dungeon, because we pretty much just kind of go straight here, you know?
Yeah. I will say, just before we get into dungeon, going back to the Tower of the Gods, that is such a cool set piece. Like sailing towards it from the nearest fast travel point. Actually, I didn't even fast travel to it. I just started on Windfall Island and I was like, I'm going to sail there.
Yeah.
Like seeing it in the distance, sailing up to it, I even sailed around it just for a while. Just like, man, this is a really, really cool piece of architecture that was put in this game, and I really like it and I dig it, and it feels grand. It feels like a piece of old Hyrule while simultaneously feeling like a piece of the Wind Waker world. I don't know how they did that balance, but they did, and it just felt amazing. Sailing up to the point where you descend into Hyrule again, and then King of Red Lions does the title drop on you. Surely you will be known as the hero of the winds. Like, oh, all right, thanks, man. The Wind Waker. Like, okay.
I'm glad the wiki has something to call us now.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. So I thought that was a pretty cool moment. I don't know. The speech was a little ostentatious and ham and cheese for me a little bit, but you know, he's an ancient king from an ancient time, and I'm sure he's given to ostentation on occasion. So
he's got a little lingering pomposity.
Yes, absolutely, he does. And you know what? Based on his outfit, I can see why.
Totally agree. Tower of the Gods, amazing piece of Zelda architecture. Oh, I did have one more thing. Sorry.
No. We don't necessarily need to move on. I'm glad to hang here as long as we have stuff to talk about.
So we talked a little bit about how, you know, Ganon has these cool moments at the finale on top of the tower. But I also really love the little speech he gives when you first get into the puppet Ganon chamber. And he says he's like angry about how everyone's like satisfied with the Great Sea, right? He kind of does a little rant. I love this quote. He says something like, scattered like fallen leaves on a forgotten pool. Love that line so much. And then he yells like, your gods destroyed you. And internally as a player, I'm thinking, yes, you're right, Ganondorf.
Like I thought the same thing when he said that. He was like, you prayed to the gods to save you and they destroyed you instead. I'm sitting there like, he's not wrong. That's almost exactly what happened. They saved a handful of people that like happened to be on the mountaintops, or maybe they did a whole Moses thing where they were like, take a leader and get your people to the mountain, and I don't know, but they genocided like most of Hyrule, and like everybody just seems kind of okay with that as a solution. And back to Max's point of it's the water dragon's fault.
It's the water dragon's fault.
It's all the water dragon's fault. We're still blaming her. She's just bad at her job.
I was gonna say the goddesses of Hyrule had their Noah's Ark.
Yeah,
moment,
they totally had a Noah's Ark moment.
But yeah, I think. Let's just chalk it up to the water dragon. I think someone let the water dragon open the tap again, and it all just went.
That's such a bad idea.
But yeah, so I just wanted to do a shout out to that moment because I love it.
Yeah, well, and it's so interesting because like the way that Ganondorf is kind of talking about Tetra in that moment, and like the way that he's like sitting over her bed and whatnot, it's like
and hasn't killed her.
Well, it's a weird moment where. Again, it feels like he's just got a little bit more humanity than we normally get from him. Mm-hmm. And I want more of that. I mean, I don't know to what extent we're going to get more Ganondorf in the series from this point out. I've got to believe he'll show up again in some way or form or fashion. But if that ever was going to happen, because we've gotten other enemies who have pathos and who have greater depths of character, right? But they're usually one-offs. You've got your Skull Kids, right? Zant does. I mean, I know
until he went nuts.
Yeah, sure. But for Ganondorf specifically, I want more of this. I want more of him as an interesting character.
Well, and his whole body language in Zelda's chamber is very anti to everything we've ever seen from him before. He almost is like protective of her in a weird way, where he's like, Link, like, don't wake her up, and he isn't trying to ritual sacrifice her, which most every other Ganon is always trying to do to Zelda, is some kind of a ritual sacrifice.
I feel like that's the very base level of interaction we can hope for between people.
Yeah,
they're not trying to ritual sacrifice you.
Yeah, and like even when he has us totally beaten and defeated, he's got Zelda and he's got Link, and neither of them are armed. Both of them are more or less unconscious. He's got his hand around Link's hand instead of his throat. All he's trying to do is take the Triforce, and he's not trying to kill anybody.
Yeah, he literally says he's not going to kill Link.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not going to kill either of you. I just want your piece of Triforce.
Well,
what?
I think the implication is that if he killed you, he wouldn't be able to get your Triforce.
Oh, okay. Well.
Oh, I didn't take that implication, but if you're right, then maybe I retract most of what I just said.
I mean,
but
your point overall is still correct that he's
acting in a very anti Ganon.
Well, I think that there's a way, and again, I'm maybe this is headcanon and maybe I'm putting more into this than is actually there. But to me, all of these moments together made it seem like this version of Ganondorf, after all these years, like we were saying earlier, he misses Hyrule. He wants Hyrule back. And to him, I can see it being a situation where Zelda and Link are just like they're just a part of his world and life there, like they're a part.
There's no Hyrule without Zelda.
Yeah, they're a part of his story. Like they're all bound in it together, and he just wants it all back. And I think that that's a very interesting concept. Like it definitely is a step above I'm doing villain shit for evil reasons,
Yeah.
He still ultimately, murders a whole island and stuff, but he's more restrained.
Yeah. That's true. He's not. Again, the lack of ritual sacrifice stands out. It's all we'll say.
One quick thing worth throwing out, we're talking about the story, is there were 2 script and event planning directors basically on Wind Waker. And one of those 2 was Mitsuhiro Takano, and the only other Zelda game he wrote for was Majora's Mask.
Ah, look at him. Return of the King. We just saw that movie the other day.
We did just see that movie the other day. No, well, that's actually not hard to. It's not hard to see the connective tissue in his style between the two games.
He does inject shades of gray.
Well, shades of gray, and also a lot of emotion and a lot of very authentic feeling motivation.
Yeah, you get a lot of pathos out of Ganondorf's body language and facial expressions, as well as the way that he moves. And obviously, Link is very expressive in the Wind Waker, in some ways good, and in some ways not so good, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely a lot of pathos in all of these characters.
So I am of the opinion, and I realize that not everybody might feel this way, but how I feel about the Legend of Zelda series as a whole is that it should always be at its base largely archetypal in its storytelling, right? I don't think, like, I don't need the Legend of Zelda to be The Last of Us, you know?
For sure.
I don't need it to be Red Dead Redemption.
Those games are great, but not what I want out of my Zelda.
But I think that, especially so, those two examples right there, Majora's Mask, and then a lot of the stuff that happens in this game, I think it really shows, and even Breath of the Wild kind of was this way. I feel like it really shows that there is room to be archetypal and to still kind of maintain your hero's journey sort of structure, and build more emotion and feeling within that structure. I think that that's definitely possible, and I like to believe that, as especially as games as a medium get more mature and grow and techniques become more advanced and there's more opportunity to do more things, I think that is the direction that the series is going in, if Breath of the Wild is anything to judge by, because Zelda's story in that game had a lot of what I'm talking about here. Very archetypal trappings, right? But like still a lot of emotion and pathos to be had there. And I really hope that continues. I would be sad if it ever got overly simplified again. I don't think it will, but
nah. I think we're at an age of storytelling in games, so that'll be hard to go backwards to.
But I really hope it doesn't go too much, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's got to be a balance.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Cool. Does anybody have anything else they want to say just generally about this section of game before we move on from
Well,
here?
I'll let you be the judge of whether or not this belongs here in next week's episode. Do we think Daphne's Hyrule started out with the same motivation as Ganondorf, or...
No, that belongs here.
Okay. And Max, you touched on it very briefly, but I kind of want to flesh it out a little bit more. Like at the beginning of the game, King of Red Lions almost felt like he was using Link as a means to an end. And it feels like here at the end of the journey, he has decided that, okay, Link is not just a tool to get what I want, which is the reintegration or the restructure or the rebreath of Hyrule, my kingdom. Because it feels like that's what he really wanted at the beginning of it. He wanted exactly what Ganondorf wanted, but under his rule instead of Ganondorf's rule. And he was using Link to do that. And it feels like at the end here, when he looks at Zelda and Link, he kind of reneges on that and decides to be of the opinion that I had my time and my time is over and it's now time for the future. Am I off base in that? Am I ascribing too sinister of a motivation to him at the beginning of the game, or what do you guys think?
I don't think you are. I think that's accurate. The difference is that the King of Red Lions, King Daphnes, comes to know Link and Tetra, and that, I think he is a more benevolent character at base than Ganondorf, and that's what makes the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely is using Link. It's the first half of the game. Right? He has all these discussions in languages Link can't speak with ancient spirits. And he doesn't tell Link the nature of the Master Sword or his own role as King of Hyrule or anything. Even after having Link go down and getting the Master Sword, he still doesn't explain what the hell's going on at that point, right? It's only after Link is defeated by Ganondorf and has to be saved that he actually opens up. And even then, it's kind of like he's opening up because he has to, because now this information is required. So I think we're supposed to see this moment where he touches the Triforce as a pivotal pivotal character moment for him. Like this is where he commits to the good course he wants of the ending that we see. Like, I think that's the implied character arc here. Yeah.
Yeah, everything that you said, Max, is really exactly what I was thinking and what led me to that train of thought, especially the type of person that has a conversation when they know someone else in the room can't hear it. It's like someone speaking in a non-native language. Like if you're a fluent Spanish speaker, but you're surrounded by English speakers and you want to say something that they won't understand, it almost always means you're f***ing them or saying something that they don't want. Like you're sharing a piece of information that you don't want everyone else to have. And that's almost never a good thing.
Yeah.
So like throughout the whole first half of this game, I really didn't trust Daphne's that much. And I was like, he's got some motive that he doesn't want me to know about, and I don't know what it is. And in that moment when he had the opportunity, I feel like
it was
written across his face that he was having a true struggle internally about, I can finally have what it is that I want and what I've been working for 1,000 years. I've been trapped as this stupid boat, and I'm a king.
As a stupid boat.
I've been a stupid boat for 1,000 years, and I'm supposed to be the king of the most powerful nation in the known world, and I can have that back. And the fact that he doesn't manifest that and instead chooses to give the future with Link and Tetra was pretty amazing and pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll end the plot section with one question for you, Matt.
Sure.
Are you excited? Are you more excited now to play Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks than you were previously, given the way that this game ends?
Yeah, absolutely more excited. I think that I still there are some base things that I sort of know about those games.
Are you over here like, oh, it's easy to be more excited than zero?
Yeah, well, yes. The negative excitement has turned into a net positive, but
it's a non-zero.
It's a non-zero. Yeah, it's a non-zero sum now, so that's good. Yeah, I think there's definitely opportunity for interesting things, right? And I think some of that comes even from last week, where we discovered the traveling merchants who come from a faraway land. Like, oh, there are other places on the Great Sea where people live. Like, that would be cool to go see those places. Very Arya Stark at the end of Game of Thrones. Like, let's go see what's out there, and that's kind of cool. I would almost like a game about that more than what I know Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass to be. But
I think Phantom Hourglass is about that. I could be wrong.
I don't know. Maybe I'm misconstruing.
I don't know. I've never played it, so I'm the wrong person.
Yeah. Anyway,
I have played like 2/3 of it, and I don't remember. So we're all in good company.
Yeah,
well, that bodes well.
So yeah, I think it'll be. I think there is an opportunity for this to be an interesting world to explore, and I hope that those games live up to at least a partial of that potential.
Cool. Can't hope for more than that. Actually, you can hope for a lot more than that, but I guess that's
not realistically. Yeah.
No. I think we're gonna have a fun time with those games. I really do. Okay, so with all that being said, let's move into part 3, which is the dungeon map, where we analyze this week's dungeon from mechanics to music and more. This week's dungeon is a Ganon's Tower, Ganon's Castle, final end of game dungeon. And these are always interesting conversations because I feel like we've been all over the place in terms of whether or not these are actually fun, right?
Yeah, we've had bad ones and we've had good ones.
Yeah, I think
we've had really bad ones.
We've had some really bad ones. I think the gold standard is still A Link to the Past, right?
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, with some more underwhelming entries being like the Ocarina of Times was not the best.
Not great.
Not the best in the world.
And then Link's Awakening, which wasn't a thing at all.
Well, that's
just
almost
a maze.
Yeah, almost not even applicable. I mean, but
right.
but yeah, we've definitely had some not wonderful incarnations of this. We've had Hyrule Castle of Breath of the Wild, which is obviously
so amazing.
Yeah. This to me, I'm just going to go first with my opinions here. This to me falls definitely in the top half. Did some ash just like?
Yeah, I was afraid it was about to burn.
Did the fire just like Mount Doom on you?
It attacked me a little bit. I was that off.
Do we need some eagles to come pull you off the side?
I would
of the
love
mountain?
an eagle to come pull me off the ground right now. That would be pretty dope. I'd be down with that.
Oh man, that movie was so good. It's always so good. Return of the King, just to clarify. Anyway, so this one to me falls somewhere in the top half for sure. I don't know if I like it quite as much as A Link to the Past or Breath of the Wild, but it does do some very interesting things that are very outside of the mold of Ganon's castle sort of situations.
For sure.
You know, I think to me, the basement level set a expectation because I didn't remember very much of this. Like, that's been kind of my biggest thing for this entire playthrough of The Wind Waker, which is that, like, I remembered broad strokes, but the details of things were kind of not really there because I just have not played this game as much as some others. And when I got into the basement level and I saw that it was your classic, like, oh, go refight 4 bosses, and then that opens a door, right? That is something that happens a fair amount in the Zelda series, and I can't say that it's ever my favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where else does it happen?
Definitely happens in A Link Between Worlds.
Oh.
Maybe that is only the other place. I could swear that happens more places than just here.
I feel like it does too, but I can't think of examples, so I'm like questioning myself.
Yeah, it absolutely 100% happens in Lorule Castle. But the thing is,
spoiler alert.
Well, sorry, but the thing is that. So in that instance, there are like actual challenging puzzle chambers that lead to the bosses, and so it's more satisfying. You know, the little stretches of dungeon themed area that lead to the bosses in the basement here are not challenging. They're not really brain teasers in any meaningful way, and so I was initially kind of disappointed. But then we kind of get through that door and we make it into the rest of the castle, and there's actually some really fun stuff to get up to here. I had completely forgotten about the whole situation where you end up in a labyrinth of fighting Phantom Ganons, and you have to like rely on the positioning of their dropped swords to know which door to go through. To me, that's actually like a really interesting mixture of both the Lost Woods and the Windfish's Egg.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh, I never made that connection, but you're right. It does feel like Windfish's
I
Egg.
think that. So I'll be honest. When it started out, after I fought the first boss, I was like, dang it, it's one of these again. It felt very Ocarina of Time in that way, and not the good way.
Well, especially with the dungeon themed sections, right?
Yeah. That's exactly like as soon as I realized what it was. Because the first one I did was very nice. I love that sound. The first one I did was the big ghosty boy, which was probably my least favorite boss in the whole game. Like I was
trying to remember his name. I can't.
Yeah, because they don't tell you the names of the bosses.
I kept trying to think. I was like, it has a J. Is it Jellicoe? No, that's the bad captain from Star Trek.
We don't like him either.
I kept landing in like a Jello area. Like it sounds
Jell-O
like
works.
Jello. I don't remember.
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. That's what I'll call him.
Okay.
Yeah, from Ghostbusters.
Yeah, sure.
I think it works.
Or Stay Puffed Marshmallows.
Yeah, let's call him Stay Puft Marshmallow. There you go. Big Ghosty Boy was the first one I did, and the lead up to that is just like a really scary looking crypt full of Redeads and the Shadow Chews, and like
that was actually the only fun one of these little sections.
Totally 1000% agree. And like it started off and I was like, oh cool, we're having like some dungeon rehash, but it's leading into at the end there's probably like I was hoping there'd be like some more puzzly things, and then it was just like nope, boss fight, and I was like, ugh, god damn it, not again.
Yeah. Imagine if each one had just been like a hard melee against a bunch of
I would have
enemies,
loved
like
that so much more.
Savage Labyrinth style.
I would have loved that so much more.
But it's like the enemies that you fight in that dungeon.
Yeah, like you run in there and you fight like 3 Stalfos at the same time as some Wizrobes and Redeads and some of the little ghosts that run around. I guess they're Poes.
Yeah. The forest one has got like 4 Mothulas or something.
Yeah, that would have been way better. So once I like figured out that that's what this was, and then I looked at the door, obviously it like zooms in on the door and the thing glows and you can see the other 3. And I was like, okay, I know what I'm about to have to do and I really don't want to do it. And this is going to suck. And I finished it. And then you have the long hallway that leads up to the big door. And I was like, if this is really all that this is going to be the bottom of my list for like ending dungeons. And then it wasn't. And then we did more things and it got way better. And I was like, yay, this is more fun. So like started off on a really weak note. And then I guess part of it was the pleasant surprise of that not being the only thing, which is putting it higher on my list of being pleasantly surprised.
That's fair. But it had some like, so yes, you're absolutely right.
I'm not done.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that it.
I want you to be able to express your thoughts, Matt.
Thank you.
I think that your opinions are important.
Thank you. I appreciate. Well, seeing as I'm 50% of the podcasting host of the,
you're 33% today.
Of the recurring cast, like the standard cast, 50%. You and me. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
you are the Spock to my Captain Kirk.
I'd rather be the Riker to your Picard, but okay.
You want to be Captain Kirk?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be Captain Kirk.
I take that back. I take that back. Picard for life. Sir Patrick Stewart, marry me, please,
dude. I'd even be the Kira to your Cisco. Kira's awesome.
All right.
Anyway, Star Trek tangent aside,
I'd rather be Janeway than
really. Actually, yeah, Janeway's kind of awesome. I'm not gonna lie.
Chakotay's not.
I like Chakotay. What's wrong with Chakotay?
He has a highly problematic Native American.
That was not his fault. They hired a guy who claimed to be a Native American specialist who lied his ass off through the entire series.
Well, it's really unfortunate in hindsight.
It is. It is not his fault, though. He's still a cool character. God, wow. Where was I going with that? Anyway, back to Zelda. Very far away from Star Trek. So like a lot of things that were done really well was even that first room where you have to memorize the room and then go over to the adjacent room and hit the things in the right pattern, and then King of Red Lions like sails in. I was like, what? And Link's reaction was like exactly how I felt. He's like, ah! And I was like, yeah,
maybe the only time in this game that you've like felt that Link's reaction was appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, dude, what the hell? Where did you come from? And that's never explained where he came from. No idea. Still don't know how that happened.
Well, he was definitely down there, and we know that he can go from a legsman to
a boatman
to a boatman.
Yeah, so, apparently at will.
Do you think he has like multiple boats and he possesses them as a ghost?
Well, that's kind of cool. The weird thing, because at the end of the game we have like the boat.
I think that they made that like as a tribute to him. Like my takeaway was that they just carved that boat.
I got the impression that it was the same boat, just non-possessed of a spirit.
I mean, maybe you're right, but I took it as, they like remade the King of Red Lions for Link. Like Tetra and the pirates like carved that little boat for him. But
honestly, that's more tasteful than riding
the corpse.
Dad boats.
The corpse.
Dad corpse.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth if it's boat corpse. But I thought that was really well done. And then you're right. The section refighting Phantom Ganon was cool. Beat him really fast, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess that was it. And I didn't catch onto the first time that the sword falls in the direction that you're supposed to go. Like I read the hint, but I had no idea what it meant. I just happened to guess right the first time. And then the second time I beat him, I guessed wrong and had to fight a whole bunch of green bokoblins. Came back in, refought Phantom Ganon. I actually picked up his sword and went around and hit all the doors with the sword to see if one would like light up. And then I just picked one, and it happened to be right. And then the third time, I realized the sword was falling in the direction of the door you're supposed to go through, and like my mind was blown. I was like, oh, that is so cool. That is so creative and innovative, and I don't know how they coded that, but like that was really cool. I loved that. That was peak. It was awesome.
So here's a good moment for our resident game designer Max to jump in. I mean, how do you feel about so talking specifically about the Phantom Ganon gauntlet and the sword directionality and all that? I mean, is that as cool as we're thinking it was, or?
Yeah, I think it's cool. So the Zelda devs have said many times that like what they're trying to do with puzzle design is make players feel smart, right? They want players to perceive something as difficult and then solve it reliably, which is a hard needle to thread, right? Because if you don't feel like it's difficult, then you don't feel smart when you solve it. And I think so. I remember being totally stuck on this puzzle when I was a kid playing this for the first time. I probably spent like an hour trying to figure this out, maybe 2.
That sounds like a frustrating 2 hours.
Yeah, although at least I got to fight Phantom Ganon a bunch of times, who has awesome theme song.
That music, that music is so good. Well, because it's the Ocarina of Time. Yes. I mean, yeah, it's great.
Yeah. But I think the actual puzzle mechanic of the sword falling is pretty well done. The only problem with it is it's so utterly unlike anything else in this game, which doesn't have really physics-based falling puzzles. Like that never really matters anywhere else. I think a lot of people have a hard time making that jump. So like it's maybe erring a little bit too far onto the hard side for a lot of their audience, especially for this game, which was skewing more towards.
Well, and it's also, I think you're sort of set up for failure the first time you do this, unless you've read the tablet in advance, which
understand what it means.
Yeah, which I know the game wants you to have done. The trouble is, this game has already sort of trained you to just like go pick up the weapons of your fallen enemies, right?
Yeah,
and as soon as you do that, the puzzle's ruined.
Yeah. And that was what I did the first time also. As soon as it fell, I picked it up. And because I remembered the bit about the sword of the enemy below will like show the way or whatever it said. And I was like, cool. So I'm going to pick up the sword and then walk through the nearest door and hopefully that'll be the right one. And it was the right one. So, and then I tried it.
Well, you got the red herring solution that really threw you off.
Yeah, exactly. That's really what threw me off the second time. Went and picked up the sword, walked through a door, it was the wrong door. And I was like, well, okay, I guess it's not that way. Just that's not how you do it. So
but I will say from like a narrative and thematic perspective, this is really cool, just being trapped in the bowels of Ganon's castle and like being unable to progress past his phantom, until you figure out, like, that's neat. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, the atmosphere here is awesome.
Especially once you get into the upper levels, and it like this version of Ganon's tower has such a unique architecture, and which is appropriate, right? Because this game has a very unique visual style. But it really bears out here, and it creates an incarnation of something that we've seen a million times before. And to me, made it feel very interesting and very new.
So do you feel like this architecture style is unique? Because like I felt very Ganon's Castle from Ocarina of Time through most of it.
Well, I was looking at a lot of the... I'm talking a lot about the minute details here, right? Like a lot of the patterns on the walls and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I guess I was mostly looking at the overall impression, the red carpeted stairs, the long staircases.
Well,
the
that
part
most definitely felt Ocarina of Time. Ganon's Castle.
Like that's what I was mostly looking at. Like the pillars and the carvings are very Spirit Temple, which I think is also appropriate given that Ganon is a Gerudo. So and
Gerudo is probably the architect for the castle.
Yeah, exactly. Like I felt like it was very appropriately themed for Ganondorf in this era, and I felt like it was a good collaboration of Ganon's Castle, Spirit Temple, and the bowels were a little Forest Temple-y, which also works because Phantom Ganon. So I felt like it was a good mishmash.
Yeah. And of course, once we get past the Phantom Ganon bit, we have the really cool puzzle, which is honestly felt pretty shrine-like. It felt kind of like a shrine in Breath of the Wild, where you had to look at the pattern in one room and then take it to the next room and then hit it in the precise sequence with your boomerang. That's always a lot of fun. I never get tired of sequential boomerang switch puzzles.
Especially in this game. It works so well. I love it.
Like I really think that that's always something that's decently fun to do, even though it's sort of like dumb, puzzle design. But it's like, but at least here, it's like there's an element of memory. Like you had to memorize what was happening in another room, and then that was your solution to the puzzle. So that was all a pretty good time. All that is to say, if nothing else, I think that the amount of time that you have to spend in a Ganon's Castle is often tied to the amount that I enjoy it. That's not always the case, but like some of them can feel pretty brief. And this one, you know, I feel like I spent about as much time in here as I spent in, I don't know, Dragon Roost Cavern, for instance. You know, like
I feel like
my time investment was good. It was kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, I think time investment wise, I'm more close to the forest place. Yeah, it wasn't quite as long as Dragon Roost for me.
Yeah. So we make it up from those middle floors, and we come to a multi-stage boss fight. We've got the beginning, of course, with Puppet Ganon and its various incarnations, and then we'll talk about the actual fight with Ganondorf later. But Matt, I was very curious to know what you thought of Puppet Ganon.
I thought it was visually ridiculous. Like, it was fun. I'm not gonna lie. I thought the fight was really fun. I figured out very quickly about the he's on strings. That's like the Baronade fight. I don't even remember what the other guy was called. I'm just gonna call him Baronade Light.
Cali Demos.
I'm gonna go with Baronade Light. Baronade round 2 or Baronade Light. Like that trains you to look at those strings and be like, I need to break those. So I figured that out very quickly. What took me a little bit longer to figure out, I was trying to use the light arrows on his mouth and then on like his chest. And then I was like, oh, he's got this blue orb on his tail. Maybe I should probably shoot that. So once I figured that out, it was pretty fine. I thought the third round of Puppet Ganon, the snake, was the most challenging.
It's Moldorm.
Yeah, it is.
Never had Moldorm in 3D before.
It's literally Moldorm, except Ganon. And I thought that was more fun than the other two. The spider one was weird because it literally just goes up onto the ceiling, spins around, and then randomly drops in a certain orientation. So I was like not nearly as interested in that one.
But that one's so fun because you have to utilize the reflection in the water. Like that's a really neat thing.
Oh no, I just looked up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just went into where you can look around.
Oh, dude, no, what you're supposed to be able to do is, so you go out into the arena and you look down and the water shows the reflection of what's above you. And so you're supposed to be able to position yourself behind him after he spins based on that.
Oh.
You can very reliably position yourself that way. It's a little easier.
Yeah, the looking up was not nearly as foolproof. So, yeah, I wish I had figured that out earlier because that would have been cooler. But no, I didn't know that. So, neat tip.
I think it's cool that they built reflective water specifically for that fight. It's never seen anywhere else in the game.
I feel like this game has a few things like that, right? Where it's like, it happens once, it's really cool, it never happens again. But yeah, it's really cool here. I want to go back to the Moldorm phase real quick because it's just so funny. Like in top-down Zelda games, we're so used to like, oh, we need a filler boss, let's throw a Moldorm in there, you know? and it's like, okay, cool. That's just a convention at this point. I like it. And so when I saw that third phase, that's what it was, I was just like, oh my God, he's made it into 3D. Can't keep Moldorm down. He keeps coming back.
Definitely the hardest boss in the whole game.
Yes,
no doubt.
Every single time I hit that tail, I felt so good about myself.
Absolutely. And my last shot to the tail, I like led him perfectly, and it was like his tail's gonna be right here. Boom! I felt like Legolas, like shooting one of the Moomakil or something. I was like, oh my God, I hit that shot. Hell yes! It was so satisfying.
On the aesthetic of Puppet Ganon, I like it. I think it's a really well-designed boss visually. I think that... So here's something that I was thinking about as I was playing it, Matt. I had an epiphany. I really like this boss because it has this very... So a lot of the character design in this game feels very Japanese to me. To me, this is the most Japanese feeling game of any of the 3D Zelda games in terms of its style and aesthetic and its personality. Is that fair to say, Max? Do you agree? Like, especially in terms of like the like Ganondorf, especially. Like, I was looking at Ganondorf and like his outfit and wardrobe and the styling of his character and everything. Like, there's so much There's a lot of Japanese personality in this game.
Drawing a lot of inspiration from Japanese sources, like Tower of the Gods and all the robots and stuff. They have the same inspiration that like the Guardians do in Breath of the Wild, which is the ancient pottery in Japan. I'm forgetting the term for it right now. And like a lot of the visual style is based on a pretty famous classic animated movie in Japan that I'm also forgetting the name of right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like there's some Japanese influence in that way. I personally would say Breath of the Wild feels more Japanese influence.
Well, yeah, so to clarify, yes, Breath of the Wild has much more of like a traditional Japanese influence, I think. But this game to me has always, and I don't have the biggest grounding with like anime, you know, as an art form, but this game has always felt to me like it has got the most Japanese animation influence, I guess, is how I would put it.
That is definitely true.
And I think that's why you don't like it as much, Matt, because you have never been quite as drawn to that style of anything, really.
Yeah.
And I think for a similar reason, you don't enjoy the look of this boss.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally accurate.
And I think that goes kind of a long way towards explaining why you've never really gelled with the overall aesthetic and personality of this game.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
There's something interesting there because like typically Americans, when we talk about anime, we're referring to like shoujo and shonen manga inspired anime, which looks very different than the classical movie that like The Wind Waker is based on. I looked it up. It's called The Little Prince and the Eight-Headed Dragon is the way it's typically translated. If you Google that, you'll find a movie that looks just like The Wind Waker. But like that, and that's more of a children's animated movie, like something that like you would have taken a young child to in the US, more like Disney. And it looks very different from what we usually think of as anime in the West.
Yeah.
But in interviews, they refer to it as anime because it's an animated film in Japan. That's all anime.
Sure. Yeah. Anyway, just a fun little observation there. I think if anybody has been listening to all of this and thinking, man, this art style is so charming and the personality is great and Matt just doesn't seem to like it and whatnot, I think that there's a base interest in certain aesthetic that I appreciate a lot of this stuff. You know, I like it quite a bit, but I don't think it's ever been something that you have had any emotional attachment to.
No. Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, I know that you're right. You are correct. Yes.
So there you go.
It also looks like Emperor's New Groove at times, which is the best Disney movie.
Oh,
It is the best Disney movie.
Love Emperor's
Well, a lot
New
of that
Groove.
goes back to, I mean, I know in an earlier episode we talked about how a lot of the architecture and like shape language is actually more like Central American, you know? And I think that that's perfectly valid as well. But I think a lot of the personality is very Japanese animation. And so, yeah, just there you go. Mystery solved for anyone who was wondering why Matt just wasn't getting it.
I mean, I'm famous for just not understanding and not getting things. Apparently, I don't know. We'll just leave it at that. I'm the resident naysayer for all things. How about that?
Except for Skyward Sword, which you are the opposite of that. So yeah, okay. So Puppet Ganon, really fun fight. As in terms of like, so especially if we're breaking down this Ganon boss fight into two phases, the way that Ocarina of Time had Ganondorf and then Ganon, I think that this is an excellent first phase, just because there's so much going on and there's so much more to do, and it's so much more challenging than just the Ganondorf fight was.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was also interesting to reverse the formula and do the, what is, I guess, comparable to the beast form of Ganon first and then Ganondorf second. Like that's a very prominent reversal of the normal formula. So I thought that was interesting and good and subverted expectations in a good way.
This was the first Zelda game that had the final boss be Link and Zelda fighting together against human form Ganon in a sword fight.
And it was awesome.
So that
And then they've done that in most of the 3D games since.
So that fight is incredible. I love the traversal that you have to do to get up to that platform from the main boss room. Like, I love how the main thread from the puppet, you have to climb up it and then just ascend the rafters to get on top of the tower. That's really cool. Just a little bit of a fun little bit of environmental depth, I guess. But once we get to the top of the tower, yes, we're faced with Ganondorf himself. Zelda's there. All of these excellent story beats happen. And then what we have is such a fun sword fight with Ganondorf. He's using his twin blades the way that Ganon did in Ocarina of Time. But to me, this was just like such a fun, dynamic fight. It's difficult because he does tons of damage. You really have to be quick on your feet and be good with your parries, which I think is, once again, a great showcase of the combat in this game. But also, to your point, Max, yes, having to fight the final boss with Zelda is a big deal after this point. But I think that this is the best incarnation of it.
Oh, yeah. I think so, too. It's probably my favorite finale. I don't know. There's a lot of competition. A lot of them are amazing. But Twilight Princess has an amazing final boss, too. That might be my favorite.
How long, Matt, did it take you to figure out that you needed to reflect your light arrow off your mirror shield?
She had to tell me that that's what she's going to do. So I guess a long time.
She gives like increasingly explicit hints. I think the first one, she's like, "You know what to do, Link," and you're like, "I don't have any idea what you're talking about." Link.
That's exactly what the first one. Yep. And then I was running around. I was trying to hit him while she was aiming so that he would be distracted, and then he just kept jumping over it. I tried to time where you push A to dodge around and riposte at the same time, and he dodged both, and I was like, okay, this guy is ridiculous. He's good. And then she was like, Link, use your shield, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, I can do that. So yeah, she had to tell me explicitly what to do.
There you go.
It's funny because it sort of makes sense that a mirror shield can reflect a light arrow, but they have such a physical presence that it's not actually intuitive that that's how it would work.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. I had no idea that was possible. It's never been done before other than reflecting just actual light. And also, why would I ever assume that Zelda is going to shoot at me to hit Ganondorf?
At some point it becomes really confusing, right? Because I actually got shot by Zelda at one point. I took damage from Zelda shooting me with a light arrow.
That's awesome. That didn't happen to me. That's really funny.
I didn't know that was possible. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think that if there had been some sort of puzzle solving mechanic earlier in the dungeon that required you to use the light arrows for the purposes of casting light, as we kind of got used to in the Earth Temple, then this might have been a little bit easier to figure out. But, as it is, to me, it's sort of the same as needing to figure out that you have to use your Skyward Strike to absorb lightning in Skyward Sword.
Yeah, that's fair. And the only way I figured that one out the first time was by total accident.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, here you go. It happens.
Yeah. So yeah, especially thematically, I just think it's a really fun, very cinematic thing that sort of happens here, and it's a great way to end this fight. I don't know. I think that's what this really all boils down to. It's not the most complicated boss fight we've ever had in a Zelda game. It's not necessarily the hardest, certainly not the easiest, but just all of the things that happen in it, in addition to the fact that you're you feel like you're about to be consumed by the ocean for this entire thing. It's just constantly it's raining down upon you. It's just such a great atmosphere for a final boss arena. And it's a really cool juxtaposition to what we normally get, which is some variation on a Ring of Fire or something,
Yeah, for sure. I thought that the added set piece of the rain and the water falling all around you the whole time was really well done and tastefully executed, and an excellent addition to the set piece of the fight.
Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about this whole final Ganon fight, Max?
I largely agree with what you two have been saying. I love how dynamic it feels because you have to move around a lot. Zelda's moving around and shooting things around, and Ganondorf is like he's doing like flips and shit. Like he's cartwheeling around, flying around like Cirque du Soleil, and he looks awesome while he's doing it, even with that character design that you would never expect to do it. Like the silhouettes he strikes with those two twin swords and the poses he like blocks you with and stuff are awesome. So I love all of that stuff. And then of course there's the visuals of the arena, like you were just talking about. Like it feels like the end of the world, that you're fighting in like the eye of a hurricane that's destroying Hyrule, because that's literally what's happening right now when this fight is going on, right? Like the whole sea is crashing down around you, and you can kind of feel it. And that's like, super cool, super unique. I mean, a lot of other Zelda game finales have really cool final arenas too, like Ocarina of Times and Twilight Princesses or no. What's the phrase? Whatever. They're good too. And of course, Skyward Swords is awesome. But this is probably my favorite arena of all of 3D Zeldas, or of any of them, for the finale.
Yeah.
I think one of the coolest things that I saw happen was doing one of my parries where you roll around and try to hit him from the back. He just straight up throws one of his swords behind his back vertically and just blocks you. He's just like, psh, nah. And I was like, mad respect.
It's like
that was so cool.
1,000 years he was alone in Hyrule doing yoga.
And sparring with some unfortunate moblins or something and just totally trashing them regularly.
Really pays off. He's very spry.
He is an excellent swordsman. There's no doubt about that.
Oh man. And then of course it ends in possibly the most badass way that any boss fight could possibly end.
Yeah,
which is that
was insane.
We just stick the Master Sword straight into Ganon's face, which in fairness happens in Ocarina of Time as well.
But like out in Ocarina of Time.
It's true.
Yeah.
Like, dude, and that sword is all the way, like, it's got to be halfway down his back vertically. Like,
and he's still talking.
Yeah, and he's like, and I'm like, my God, how are you still doing anything? Yeah, that was nuts.
I know that we're kind of out of the plot section here, but I did just want to say, to me, of all of the emotionally impactful things that happen in this little bit here, the one that hits me sort of the hardest is leaving the Master Sword at the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
Well, I
mean, I get it, but
it's not needed anymore. Is the thing. Like,
but
what is the Master Sword without Hyrule, right?
Yeah,
or Ganon to defeat. Yeah.
We're just leaving you down there.
Yeah, exactly. Like my girl.
Well, now I'm sad.
My girl is down there underneath 10,000 feet of water or whatever. Like, poor Fi.
Oh man, I guess that is okay. Going back to the curse of demise, right? Like, I guess that's sort of sad now, right? Because Fi is supposed to be our eternal companion in the fight against the reincarnation of Demise's curse.
Yep.
Which I guess now we're just kind of like SOL. Like, oh man, sure wish we had that magic sword around for this.
Well, I'm sure you could go pull it up off from the bottom of the ocean with a grapple hook at some point. Just, go get a sea chart and go over there and just pull it up. And
Tinkle can decipher it for us.
After this, the whole economy of pulling stuff off the seafloor stopped working because the floor was too far down now.
Well,
everything was now we just saw it become before.
That's a good point.
Everyone's out there using their grapple hooks like, what is going on? This used to work.
The part that hits me emotionally the most is the final moments with Daphne's Nohan's and Hyrule. The kids bubbling.
Yeah, they're trying to reach for him.
Link tries to reach for him, and he reaches too, and then he turns his eyes down, accepting his fate. I used to be so mad that they didn't just take him with him. I'm like, why do they get these bubbles and he just sits there? Like, what the hell? I think it's because his Triforce wish, he wishes for a future for these children, so they're saved by the Triforce wish.
That's exactly what I took it to mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And he didn't wish for one for himself because he's of the past.
Sad.
And so he just kind of drowns down there.
I guess he drowns, yeah. I mean, or the pressure would kill him.
R.I.P. to a real one, King Daphnis No Hansen Hyrule. Yeah. No, I definitely felt the same way. And I mean, the music that plays while all this is happening is like a big part of that too. You know, I think the title of the track is Farewell Hyrule King,
Yep.
you know? And,
For
man.
the episode to prep myself.
Did it work?
Oh yeah, I got real sad.
That's how we want everyone to show up to recording times. Real sad.
My favorite rendition of the Hyrule Castle theme.
Yeah. Well, and it shows up in a lot of like, you know, those YouTube like top 10 best Zelda tracks, right? Like it shows up in there a lot. So, because it is just that good. And it is a really effective
piano.
Yeah. Yep.
Requiem.
Yeah. And it's a very effective underscore to this like very heavy moment. You know, and then of course, like everything gets happy again. We get back above the ocean and we see the pirate ship and it's like, oh, Medley and Makar are okay and Kamali's here. And, you know, so everything's happy after that.
Yeah. It's especially happy to see Medley and Makar because you leave them wondering like, are their lives over? Do they have to be sages forever now?
Are they just like stuck in those like empty boss rooms forever?
Yeah. Like the last sages seem to have been.
Well, they actually died. So yeah, that's still my take on all that. Those sages are all dead. They were dead when you got there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely dead ski.
Yeah. Well, does anybody have anything else they want to say about this incarnation of Ganon's Tower before we move on from here?
Nope, I'm good.
Cool. Well, I feel like we need to blow right past bloopy trails because what is there even really to say?
Yeah, I did nothing.
Nothing applicable.
Although it is kind of neat that you can use Ganon's portal to go back up to the overworld if you need to like re-up on potions or anything. Like I thought that was
or
kind
just
of
finish up a side quest or something. I appreciated that too.
That's the only time I can think that ever happens.
Yeah, I did think it was really cool that thing pops up right in the middle of the Forsaken Fortress. Like, oh yeah, of course this is where it goes. You know, just neat. It's kind of like the inverse of the Tower of the Gods. You know.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, okay. Well, with all that being said, we are moving right past part 4 and getting into part 5, which is Z targeting, where we lock on to fascinating characters or enemies that we happen to cross. All right. So this is going to be tough because there's a lot to choose from here. And so we have this rule where if you've previously chosen a Zelda, a Link, or a Ganon, I don't know if Ganon's actually in a part of this rule, but if you've previously chosen a Zelda or a Link in the game,
or Daphne's,
then you can't choose them again. And I'm actually struggling to remember if I've chosen any of those.
You haven't. I've chosen Daphne's.
You chose Daphne's?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I guess with that being said, I'm going to go to you first, Matt. Who's your Z targeting pick?
Oh, Ganondorf. 1000%. Yeah, Ganondorf was just an excellent character. His characterization is probably the best in the entire series. And it was just compelling and tragic in a way, but still very much Ganondorf and definitely the bad guy. And I thought it was just very, very, very well done.
Cool. Max, I'm going to go to you next. I'm going to leave myself in the unenviable position of choosing last.
Well, I'm going to choose the very unsurprising choice of Daphne's. I would have chosen Ganondorf as my actual first choice, but Daphne's is just as good. And I think this is his story, and this is his climax, and he gets to make a Triforce wish, and he gets to say goodbye to his old life and his old land to give these kids a future, and it is very good storytelling.
Notably, I think the only character in a Zelda game to make a Triforce wish
that isn't Link.
I
was going to say the exact same thing.
Or I guess technically Ganondorf. I think the implication is that Ganondorf off screen wished on the Triforce in Ocarina of Time, and that's how well, actually, no, he didn't wish on it. He tried to, and then it broke into pieces.
He wished on it
because
in the
his heart was
backstory of Link to the Past.
But isn't that what happened in Ocarina? Isn't that how the Dark World was created he wished on it and the Sacred Realm became evil?
No, he didn't actually get the full Triforce in Ocarina of Time.
Oh, right. In the Downfall timeline, he manages to get both pieces from Zelda and Link.
Yeah, I have no idea how this all hooks up, really. I don't have it all memorized. It's goofy, but but
it's goofy. It's really goofy.
In backstories, Ganon has wished on the Triforce, at least in Link to the Past. Maybe there's stuff too. I forget.
Well, then I guess I'll revise my statement to say Daphne's is the only person who is not a holder of a Triforce piece who has wished on the Triforce in the Zelda series.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I don't think Zelda ever has. I will not say anymore.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thank you. But yeah, no, Daphne's definitely a great pick. That's who I was going to pick in the highly unlikely event that you didn't pick him. But I knew you were going to. So, I'm also going to say, Ganondorf, Daphne's. It's really it's completely even. Like
it's their climax.
Yeah, you could go either way with it, and it's totally applicable. They are the stars of this entire. Like you said, Max. I mean, I guess you could really call Wind Waker Daphne's story mainly, with Link as like a catalyst for some things, and Ganondorf is equal in that way, which is very interesting just from a narrative construction standpoint.
Although Pirate Dress Errol is very compelling in this section.
I love her little skull dress that she has here.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, so you remember earlier in the season I was saying that I started up that New Game Plus mode from a previous clear.
Yeah, and you can wear lobster shirt.
Yeah, and you're just wearing lobster shirt the whole time. Errol in that version is wearing pirate shirt the whole time. Yeah. So yeah, that outfit is pretty cool. So I'm gonna pick something other than Daphne's or Ganondorf just for the sake of diversity of
Tetra
of saying something. But yeah, I guess so. I mean,
she's pretty cool.
She is. I was gonna talk about Phantom Ganon just as an enemy.
Yeah, do
enemies
it.
Are technically under the umbrella here. I never get tired of fighting Phantom Ganon. I love the fight with him in Ocarina of Time, and obviously this is super similar to that. I love the aesthetic of Phantom Ganon in this game. I think it's so cool because he really does look like just the spectral evil form of physical Ganon, which is really, really great. That kind of glowy purple thing he's got going on is cool. And I enjoyed fighting him in this dungeon, even though you had to do it like 7 times each time.
Yeah, I actually never got tired of it.
Yeah.
And like, even though you fight him so many times, did you know you can kill him in one shot with a light arrow?
Yes, I did know that. But of course, you don't have the light arrow for the first few times that you fight him.
Right. I think only the first time.
Well, when you're in the little maze down there, like at the end of the maze, you get the light arrow. And then
I definitely used a light arrow to kill him in the maze. I think you get the light arrow after the first time you fight him. Because it's a full, like you do multiple damages instead of just one. Because every other time you fight him, if you knock him down, you just hit him once and he's dead.
I think it's
the
like
first time you fight him.
Halfway through, like you navigate the maze, get the light arrow, and then you have to navigate the maze again to get to the doorway that you have to break with the sword.
Right. So once you get back up to the chamber with the symmetrical rooms where there's the clue that tells you what switches to hit in the other room, that Phantom Ganon that you fight in there, you have to kill with the light arrow, and then it drops its sword, and you can use that sword to break open the door.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
And that was a really cool moment, right? Like the effects and everything that happened there were great. But yeah, Phantom Ganon's a really fun enemy to fight. I'm going to give an honorable mention for my Z targeting to all of the people who are important to Link that he's just left on that island.
He didn't even look back and wave goodbye. He just like straight stone cold Steve Austin just pieces out.
They had to show the growth from his initial departure cutscene where he waves to the point where Tetra makes fun of him, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but it's not growth to not say goodbye to your aging grandmother who you'll probably never see again. Like, come on, say bye.
I will say that, so I was kind of wondering about this. I'm not sure if the implication is that he's like, okay, peace out, family. I'm leaving you forever, right? I think maybe the way this is supposed to be read is that they're going to go find a new land and then bring everybody to it. Because
I guess that's fair.
Because like, what's the point of finding a new land if it's just you and a bunch of pirates with one female? Like,
they're gonna Adam and Eve that.
They're from a genetic standpoint,
that doesn't
that's
work.
Unsustainable.
You're right.
So yeah, no, I think the implication is that I don't think it's supposed to be like a forever goodbye or anything, but it's definitely a little unclear. But anyway, I love that you spend all this time like saving Errol and your home island and everything, and now
then
it's
you
just
peace
like,
out.
Bye y'all, been fun.
Yeah,
On to
that was
the
fun.
next
I
adventure.
did like seeing Tetra back in her pirate garb. I thought that was fun.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and with her pirate tan, mysteriously.
Yeah. And also she was in pirate garb as soon as you surfaced back on the ocean. She wasn't still in her Princess Zelda dress. Like,
Oh yeah, that is weird, isn't it?
yeah, there's no costume
I
continuity.
mean, I guess it was
And,
Daphne's magic that like transformed her into Zelda.
That's fair.
Guys.
Yeah. And he's now dead. So Daphne's R.I.P.
It's a weird late game outfit switch. It's like the end of Empire Strikes Back when all of a sudden Lando is wearing Han's clothes, and you're
Yeah. You're like, wait, did you just like raid Han's closet in the Millennium Falcon? That's kind of a
what
dick
you
move.
doing there, buddy?
That's how you psych yourself up to go rogue.
You put on Han's vest.
and not your cape. Man, what a lack of cape.
Always wear the
That's
cape.
Sad. Always wear the cape.
Yeah.
If you'd gone before me and had chosen Daphne's, I would have chosen the Land of Hyrule as my character.
Oh, that's a classic Max
That's
Nichols.
a classic Max thing. I love that.
But I actually would not have chosen that. Like, I think that's generally a pretty good play. I wouldn't have actually done that in this instance, just because as neat as it is being in like little bubbles of old Hyrule,
I want to see more of it.
it feels weirdly small, and especially given that once you leave Hyrule Castle, you just take this one little walkway and you're immediately in Ganon's tower, you know? It makes it feel very video gamey, right?
Ganon's Tower was like 2-minute walk from Hyrule Castle.
Yeah, it was literally next door.
And so that's actually, I was actually going to mention that earlier, but then Matt brought up the point that's like, oh, I think Ganon built this tower while he was like imprisoned underneath the sea or whatever. I was like, okay, I think that actually makes a lot more sense, because I was just thinking like, all right, Ganon invades Hyrule and then just sets up shop like a block over from Hyrule Castle. It's like, how does that work? You know? Matt's earlier headcanon explanation makes a little bit more sense to me, but you could have said the Great Sea as a character. I mean, that would have been an option as well.
The Great Sea, we didn't say goodbye to the Great Sea.
It's true. And actually, I want to point out something interesting. Another interesting about Ganon's first monologue while he's, reading Tetra's dreams. He says, oceans and oceans and oceans, none of it even bearing fish. And I thought that was an interesting little piece of...
We have Fishman.
Well, but you know it, like, you don't eat Fishman, presumably.
Maybe you don't eat fish.
I hope you don't eat fish, man. That's like semi-cannibalism. We probably shouldn't do that.
That the Zelda lore fanatics would be better equipped to answer, but I do know that there's like other places where it kind of supports the idea that there aren't fish in the Great Sea. Like the Great Sea isn't hospitable to sea life for some reason. And the fishmen are an exception.
Because they're sentient.
Because they're like, I don't know. I feel like the fishmen are like soldiers of Hyrule, like transformed into ever-present fish spirit guardians or something weird. Like,
that's a cool idea.
I like that headcanon. We're going to keep it.
We need to start keeping a running list of headcanon.
Anyone in our Discord community who wants to go keep a list of our headcanon.
We already have people transcribing the plot recaps.
They can be other people. People who are not transcribing plot recaps.
Okay.
Dark Nug and Stephanie, you guys, or Tiffany, you guys can't do that. Or, I mean, you can if you just really want to, but...
Yeah, feel free. Go nuts.
To ask it of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're not requesting anybody do that, but if someone wants to, we would be appreciative.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of part 5. let's get into part 6, which is our final thoughts, in which we let Matt wrap up this section of the game in as succinct a way as he can think to do. Always challenging to do this for the finale of a game, Matt.
Mm-hmm. Always. Yeah, it's difficult. We come to the end of our journey across the Great Sea with a revisit to the ancient land of Hyrule, where we undergo the exploration of the castle to find Zelda taken away from us, and where we have to then go explore the dark underworld of Ganon's castle. We undergo many trials and tribulations to reach our quarry, and along the way, we fight lots of enemies, including puppets of Ganon's own design, until we finally face our foe at the top of his own tower. At the end of it all, he bests us and summons the Triforce, and just as all hope seems lost, King Daphne's Hyrule saves the world and us from certain doom at the hands of Ganon's evil wish, sacrificing himself and his kingdom for the future of those above. We then do battle with Tetra at our side to overthrow Ganondorf in his final throes of madness and frustration. Once we bring him low, the Great Sea collapses around the Kingdom of Hyrule, flooding it once and for all and destroying it and its memory. As we float back to the surface, we look down and see King Daphnes accepting his fate as the ruler of a kingdom that no longer exists. And as we resurface, we find ourselves back in the home we've always known, upon the Great Sea, where our sister Errol and the Pirates of Tetris crew save us from floating on the Great Sea forever, and end our journey by setting out to find new lands and new hope for those who live upon it.
Well done, as always, Matt. This brings us to the end of the Sacred Realms rundown for The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. This is going to be the last one of this season. We will, of course, be back next week, not with a Sacred Realms rundown, but with our recap episode where we rank this game against the other ones that we played. And then we will be back with the Sacred Realms rundown in Season 8 of this show, covering a new game, which, if you have not heard on a previous episode, that game is going to be A Link Between Worlds, which we'll be playing on the 3DS, going back to another top-down game, and one that I'm particularly excited to play, not least of which because I'm going to be able to play it in bed, which is awesome.
Yeah, very, very excited.
It's a game changer. Oh, man. Man, you know, it's been a wild ride to get here. I am so happy to have been able to replay this game. I've been really in the mood to do it for a long time. And obviously, back in 2020, 2021, when we started this podcast, I knew that it was going to be a while. Like I was right on the cusp of breaking out the Wii U and replaying it for a while there. And then we decided to start the podcast. And I was like, okay, well, now I have to wait. And I'm just going to play it whenever we get to it. And
that was almost 2 years later.
Yeah, that time has come and gone. And I loved it. You know,
yeah.
I loved my time with this game. I was talking to Matt about it earlier, and again, not to get too much ahead of our content for next week, but when it comes down to whether or not we're going to replay this game at some point in the future, you know, obviously I'm going to do it. But
definite yes.
But Matt says definitely yes, and I think fair to say whenever it comes out on the Switch, right, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. The day it comes out on Switch, I will be buying it, downloading it, and playing that as my travel game. And look, I'll say that this was probably the game I was most excited to play for the first time. When we even first discussed the possibility of this podcast and playing through all the Zelda games, like one of my first thoughts was, man, I'm so excited. I'm finally going to have to sit down and make myself play this game. It's like I've wanted to play it, but I've just never prioritized it. And like this will force me to do that. And I was very excited, and I think it paid off. I cannot say, and I would never want to say, that I didn't enjoy my time with this game. I had a very fun time, and I'm looking forward to playing it in a non-scripted fashion on my own time and in my own leisure. We discussed, and again, not to get into next week too much, but scheduling this game, I think, did it a little bit of a disservice, because it is much more of a game that's supposed to be explored on your own time and in your own way. And I think it lends itself to a much more casual playthrough style than we were really able to give it just for the sake of having to produce content for it. So I'm looking forward to a time when I'm not set to a schedule of having to do a certain amount every week. And I think even with all of that being said, I really, really enjoyed this game.
So on that point, real quick, before we get out of here, Max, do you think that, what was your experience like? Because you were playing on the same schedule that we were. Did you find that sort of took away a little bit from the casual exploration component of this whole thing that it's kind of supposed to have, and one of the reasons that it's so famous?
Not so much. Part of that is because my schedule wasn't quite as stuck as yours, because I could kind of go ahead of you, or do multiple dungeons in a week if I wanted. So I kind of was a little bit more organic with it, because I only had 2 points where I needed to be at a specific place for. And honestly, the bigger impact on the freewheeling exploration element of the game is the fact that you can't do most of the Great Sea until late game anyways. So that always weighs heavily on me whenever you play this game, and it makes me not want to explore until later anyways.
Fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. And also, I think replaying it will make exploration easier. Like for me, having to schedule time to go explore things that I didn't know if I was going to be going back to, like episode 2 or 3, when I spent 2 hours doing exploration that netted me nothing because I couldn't do it.
I think Breath of the Wild really, it created some expectations and some styles of play for you going into this game, playing this for the first time.
Totally.
That
didn't pan out.
Yeah, that caused some frustration for you. I think that's a very interesting conversation to have about if you played a lot of Breath of the Wild and you've never played the Wind Waker.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so you go into the Wind Waker having never played it after having played a lot of Breath of the Wild. What is your expectation based on what it seems like the world is and how it operates? I think that there's a very interesting conversation to be had there, and it's kind of an unfair one because we're talking about games that are separated by like 15 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And I think it's one of the things that we've tried very hard, especially in rank and recap episodes, to view and talk about these games objectively, not from the standpoint of what we've already experienced, but kind of where they are and where these games were released within their times. Right. And that's very, very hard. Especially with how much Zelda we have played, and especially the time in which I specifically grew up. The Zelda games I grew up with, they influence so much, but trying to separate my experience based on games that came out afterwards, that's going to be a big part of the conversation, I think, in our rank and recap is trying to separate my expectation for Wind Waker based on specifically Breath of the Wild, or even Skyward Sword to a much lesser extent. But ranking and reviewing Wind Waker for what it is and when it came out and in the order of chronological release.
I think it's fair to say we have some soul searching to do this week.
Yeah.
Before we record our next episode.
Yeah, it's going to be a hard one. I think the rank and recap is going to be probably the most difficult one we've had since in all 7 seasons.
And we knew
that it would be.
We knew that this was going to be the point where it started to get a little squirrely.
Yep. It's going to be hard.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see some shakeup. Also, I want to nominate an additional category for the rank and recap next week.
Yes. Go for it.
Which is, you've now played all of the 3D Zelda games that feature Beetle. And you must.
So you want to know which game has the best incarnation of Beetle, basically.
Yep, this is very important science.
It will be added to the agenda. Maybe shoot me a reminder sometime middle of the week so that I add it to the script. But we'll follow up on that. But yeah, it's gonna be a great episode. Max, do you have anything extra that you want to say about this game before we close out your time talking about it?
No, I think I've gotten most of my thoughts off my chest. Thanks for giving me a chance. I needed 3 episodes to do that this time. It was a good time.
That's okay. I mean, Here's a question I'll ask you, Max, because we're still 8 minutes shy of 2 hours, and it would be wrong to have a Max Nichols episode that didn't break the 2 hour mark. Is there any game left in our schedule, anything we haven't played yet, that you were looking forward to discussing as much as you were this game?
No, definitely not. I'm very much looking forward to discussing several of the other games, of course. Like, I think Link Between Worlds will be great. I'm excited about the Oracles and the Wind Waker sequels, which I haven't finished. But like, none of them are nearly as close to my heart as this one. The closest would be Majora's Mask, which would be great. Yeah, Majora's Mask is looming large in our upcoming.
There is a large part of me that hopes it is our last 3D game, just so that we go out on the highest note.
Well, the ringer here is like, how do we do Tears of the Kingdom? Like, where does that's going to
be it? We're going to have to discuss that at length at some point. Because we have already discussed that we don't want to do Tears of the Kingdom, our first playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom, for the pod.
No, so here's what I think we do, and I'm kind of rapping a little bit off the cuff here, but
sure.
Here's what I think we do with Tears of the Kingdom, because it's going to come very soon after we finish A Link Between Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I say after A Link Between Worlds, we bonus episode with a few recurring guests for 2 weeks. And then we do 3 weeks of Tears of the Kingdom impressions.
Sure.
As we're playing it naturally, you know, like non-structured, no Sacred Realms rundown. We just come back once a week for those 3 weeks and we say, here's what we're doing. Here's how we feel about it. Here's what we think about it. Just have a discussion, and we'll have guests on for that as well. Right. And then after those 3 weeks are over, we'll move on to our next voted game.
Yep.
And at some later point, we will do a Tears of the Kingdom season.
Sure.
And so that's where it gets a little hairy, right? Because if we're doing it that way, then I think Tears of the Kingdom becomes our last actual season.
Yep.
Until something else comes out, right?
Yep.
But I don't know. I just don't think it's right to do our Tears of the Kingdom season
the first time we play.
The first time we played during its launch window.
No.
One, I don't even know how we would schedule that. And two, I think there would be too much bias in our voting of where it lands on the list, just based on like, we've been waiting for this game for 6 years. You know?
Yes. I think you two need to protect your enjoyment of the game, because your enjoyment of these games is key to doing a good season of them.
I totally agree. Yep, totally agree, Max. Thank you for saying so.
Cool. Well, with all that being said, Max, do you want to come on for one of those 3 weeks in which we're just kind of talking about our Tears of the Kingdom impressions playing after launch day?
Yes. I'm hesitating a little bit because I'm like super spoiler shy. I'm going to like do a media blackout and stuff as soon as they're releasing trailers and stuff. And I'm going to try not to see any of them. But by that point, I will have played a lot, so I'll be less afraid.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, this has taken an unexpected tangent into how we're going to handle this upcoming massive Zelda game release that we've all been waiting years for, but
literal years.
But it's appropriate. I mean, we're getting to that time. We're a Zelda podcast, and we're approaching one of the most exciting times to be a Zelda fan.
The longest gap in time between Zelda releases,
and
ever.
It really feels like it. It really does. It's been blunted a little bit just because the Link's Awakening remaster came out during that time, and
Skyward Sword remaster.
Yes, but the Link's Awakening remaster was such a special thing for me. Like,
Skyward Sword was such a special thing for me.
Well, I appreciate your feelings. I validate them.
I don't think you do. I'm getting the impression you don't care.
Okay, all right. Man.
Just have to bust your chops a little bit.
Yeah, I know. It's just the dynamic that we have. Max, we appreciate you coming on the episode this week. It was a big one, but I think we did it justice, and there was a lot of really fun stuff to talk about, and I hope you had as much fun as we did.
Yeah, I loved it. Thanks for having me again.
Is Wind Waker so I know that as time goes on, there's probably less material for you to add to Hyrule interviews. I know like there's probably a lot of really juicy stuff to document about the early days of Zelda, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wind Waker seems like one of those where you actually have quite a lot of material to work with.
Yeah. I keep finding it is like a bottomless ocean of Zelda interviews out there. Like I have almost 800 in my database now, and I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface. There's so much, especially once you get into untranslated interviews in Japanese magazines. Like, Did You Know Gaming recently released a video about cut content from the Wind Waker, and they cited their sources, and there was like, there's like 15 interviews that they're using as sources that none of them are translated and published in English anywhere, all from like Nintendo Dream Issues, which is a magazine in Japan that has extremely high access to Nintendo figures. So that's going to be just a forever project, is like cataloging and then finding translators for these Japanese.
I mean, do you have a Japanese fluent resource who you can like kind of lean on to help you translate some of this stuff? Or are you just relying completely on whenever it happens to make its way onto,
So there are a couple interviews on my site that through just kind of happenstance, I ended up finding I'm a member of a bunch of Discords that are like about game preservation. And sometimes people will be like, yeah, I translated this interview to like answer a timeline question because we're having a debate about the Zelda timeline on this Zelda Discord. And I'm like, I jump on that. I'm like, hey, can I publish this? Because it's not published anywhere. This translation you did. And so I have a few that are like essentially exclusives or whatever, where the first time they've ever been translated to English and published that way is on my site. I don't want to be hosting exclusives because I don't want all the eggs to be in one basket.
Sure.
So I'm like, when this happens, I'm like also submitting them to the Internet Archive and stuff. Where was I going with this? Anyways, long story short, I've had one-offs like that, but I don't have any like recurring, like, this is my friend who's a good writer in English and speaks Japanese and can do translations for me.
Gotcha.
Do not.
All right. Well, this seems like a really good time to let you explicitly plug where on the internet people can go to find all this content that we're talking about.
Yeah. So I run HyruleInterviews.com. We also have a Twitter account. The Twitter account posts daily quotes that I have hand selected because I think they're interesting. I have a lot of fun with that. And then the actual main site it's kind of just a database. It's a little bit of a pain to navigate if you're not used to just raw databases, but it's basically like you can click on Wind Waker and it will show you all the quotes I have for the Wind Waker, all the people who worked on the Wind Waker, all the interviews that mention the Wind Waker. And you can click on a person's name and it will show you all the interviews that person appears in and all the quotes that person I've saved for that person, all sorts of stuff. It's all interlinked in that way. So it's a pretty powerful tool for me to just learn Zelda stuff, basically.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, that's awesome. And once again, I encourage everyone to really go check out this site, because if you have any interest in the historical context around the development of this series, then Hyrule Interviews is your place to go. Max is assembling an incredible archive of very useful information for fans of this series. So definitely go check that out. I personally, so obviously I follow your account on Twitter, and I definitely appreciate seeing the quotes that you're posting. It's a fun little thing that pops up on my timeline every now and again, and gives me a minute to sit and think and say, "Oh man, that's interesting." And so I very much appreciate that. You're doing excellent work. But until the next time we talk to you, Max, this has been a great episode. Seriously, love having you on the show, and we'll do it all again sometime in A Link Between Worlds. How's that sound?
Can't wait.
Yeah, well, neither can I, because between you, me, and all the people who are listening to this episode, A Link Between Worlds is one of those Zelda games that I actually have a lot of fondness for, and I think it might end up higher on my ranking than it might be for a lot of other people. I'm really excited to go back and play it again. So.
Between the two of you, me, and the 1,000+ people that listen to this podcast every week.
Yeah. Just between all of us. You know? So it's going to be a really good time. But until then, wish you the best, Max, and we'll catch up again soon, okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. Matt, you ready to get out of here for the week?
Let's do it. It's almost midnight. I want to go home and go to bed.
Yeah, because you don't live here anymore.
I don't. I have to drive somewhere now. Ugh, it sucks.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, you did kick me out. It just is what it is.
You have a very nice apartment now.
I do. You didn't kick me out. Just for anybody listening, we're not actually having familial strife. I was just busting his chops. It's fine.
If we ever have legitimate familial strife,
it will not be on the pod.
We'll let you know.
Probably not, but
oh man, that would make for good content though.
Of the dirty laundry special episode.
I was going to say, it'd be the real Zelda podcasters of Plano, Texas.
Oh gosh, man, that would be a pretty boring reality TV show, to be honest.
Terrible.
It would so
bad. Oh man. All right, y'all. If you enjoyed today's show and you'd like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it is not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show. That makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind the scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday with our rank and recap of The Wind Waker featuring The Detective. We'd love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. The Wind Waker can be played on the Nintendo GameCube in its original form. It can be played in its HD remaster on the Nintendo Wii U, and it can be played on any platform capable of running a Dolphin emulator.
But not on the Switch, which is a tragedy.
But not on the Switch, and that is a point of some consternation. I do feel it necessary to say that, once again, the next game that we're going to be playing is The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. If you feel like getting ahead of the game on that, it is, of course, able to be played on the Nintendo 3DS or the Nintendo 2DS.
Isn't it on a virtual console somewhere?
No, it's not.
It's really only those two places.
Yeah, but it is still decently easy to acquire. So if you want to keep up with the podcast and you have anything in the 3DS or 2DS family, I would encourage you to go try to track down a copy pretty quick. It's probably not going to run you a lot, but I doubt it's something that Walmart or Target or anything like that.
Yeah, you'll probably have to do GameStop online or eBay.
Yeah, but
Amazon might have it.
Yeah, but it's not so old or so valued that you would have a hard time finding it. So, anywho, time to get ahead of the game and track one down if you feel led to do that and to play along with the podcast. But in the meantime, may your hearts be full. May your arrows never miss. We will catch y'all next time. Sacred Realms is an independent podcast production, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Our music comes from Zelda and Chill by Mikkel and is graciously provided to us by Mikkel and Game Chops Records. Zelda and Chill is available to stream on Spotify or to purchase directly from GameChops.com. Finally, our thanks go to Nintendo for creating such exceptional and innovative experiences.